Bibbidi bobbidi boo. We got a show for you. Bibbidi bobbidi bee. We got a show from me. Ba ba bum ba bum bum. Alright, I'm just gonna open with Psychopath Nation. Psychopath Nation. This experience is making me want to rewrite verse 3. Gotta be more explicit about the pro-Nazism that exists in our society. And it is pro-Nazism at this point, right? Yeah, we can fund neo-Nazi groups, and just as long as we don't talk about it and titter embarrassingly, we're totally fine, right? Oof. Start correctly. Oh my god. Burn yourself out for dollar bills. Kill your children for a few cheap thrills. You got a problem? Well, that's too bad. You're too tired to see you've been had. Workers starve while we drop bombs. No such thing as right or wrong. We'll call you lazy while you work to death. You gotta earn yourself a moment of rest. And I won't work for a psychopath nation. No, I won't work for a psychopath nation. Burn those corpses so you can speed. Buy that garbage you don't need. We'll play the victim while you lose your grip. Why won't they work in the apocalypse and retreat into your stupid lies? We'll act confused while your children cry. We promise change but act the same. Gaslight, deflect and take no blame. And I won't work for a psychopath nation. Yeah, I won't work for a psychopath nation. As we collapse into the devil's lap, as we watch the world burn to ash, you'll whine like bitches on your way to the grave. Why won't those serfs just behave? Yeah, you fucking vampires, demons and ghouls. We're done with being treated like fools. The curse is lifted, we're free from your spell. Keep on crying while you burn in hell, 'cause I won't work for a psychopath nation. Yeah, I won't work for a psychopath nation. Yeah, I won't work for a psychopath nation. For you, pissed off, bud. I know you like that one. I know you like that one. You know, for all my griping about the pro-Nazism that I've been receiving a good amount of positive feedback too, right? It's one of these situations where we hyper-focus on the negative, right? We do. We tend to, as people, we hyper-focus on the negative. And, I mean, to me, this has been a very illuminating moment, right? We get to see who the pseudo-leftists are. We get to see who the morons are, right, in the conversation. I don't care if you don't like Putin, right? He's better than Nazis. Straight up. Straight up. I don't know, and the fact that this has become controversial, right? I'm literally talking to somebody who's trying to say, they're trying to use the not all Ukrainians argument, right? That sure, there's some Nazis, and sure, we funded them, but it's not all Ukrainians, and they don't deserve this. And it's just as childish as Hitler wasn't all Germans. He didn't represent all Germans, right? We're babies. We're fucking babies. We don't want to honor our own grandparents, our own children. We don't give a fuck about any of that. Hey, Eric, how you doing, bud? Today's going to be very memey. There's been a very memey kind of a day, right? All the news that's coming out is very, superficial, right? Because nobody really knows what's going on, honestly. Yeah, compared to outright Nazism, outright chattel slavery, or outright feudalism, capitalism is a progressive force. I mean, that is actually true. Like, this is the thing about having an adult conversation about this, right? Like, Nazism is a force that stands up and says we should exterminate groups of people. They're part of the Ukrainian government. They're funded by the state. We fund them as well, directly or indirectly. Like, I fucking don't know what you need here. Like, I really don't. Like, I don't know what needs to be said anymore. Like, the only country in the world who funds directly through the state a neo-Nazi battalion is Ukraine. What do you need? What do you fucking need? They don't see the gravity of the West's colonial history, how Nazism descended from it. Yeah, there's that too. They don't see the West as the main evil here because they don't know their history. Not really, it's all segmented. Yeah, they don't see that a lot of the policies that the Nazis adopted came from the segregation period, right? That the Nazis actually analyzed American law, like Nazi lawyers analyzed American law in regards to their segregation, right? And people don't want to see that. And I do think what is happening, and I am going to make a video about this. I think the next video I do is going to be about this subject, which is a lot of what we are seeing is Western anxiety about the fact that we're no longer the exclusive dominant power in the world. Like, it's no longer the case that when the West wants something, it gets it, right? That there are other forces, there are counterbalances. And if you're a child who realizes that you have to share the space with people, right, and that those people are just as legitimate as you, but you're like a selfish baby who's always gotten what you want, well, then what are you going to do? You're just going to cry, right? You're just going to cry and act like a fucking baby. How come no one actually reads Marx? For the same reason they don't read the Bible, dude. Like, people don't read. Like, what are you talking about? Reading. To be fair, like, Marx is fairly dense and dry reading for lots of people. Although I think there's no excuse when it comes to the Communist Manifesto. Like, if you're not sitting down and like reading the Communist Manifesto or listening to an audiobook of the Communist Manifesto, like that, like. But I mean, we are talking about a group of people who are walking around clutching onto a Bible and being like, I'm a Christian. I'm a good Christian. I don't listen to or do any of the things that Christ says to do, and in fact act in a way that runs completely counter to the life and lived experiences and the direct words of Jesus Christ, but I love him, and I'll fight to the death for him. Like, how come no one actually reads Marx? Yeah. like we're a fake society. This is like a fake position. Are you, hard-hitting stuff, are you trying to say this is like the Popular Front period? I don't want to say anything on this because I don't think I completely understand. Like, here, this is what's fun about this, man. I don't know everything about everything, right? So, Popular Front period. Popular Front is any coalition of working class and middle class parties, including liberal and social democratic ones, united for the defense of democratic forms against a presumed fascist assault. I mean, sure, that sounds not inaccurate, right? And was the alliance of fresh wind left movements, including the communists, also known as the French Communist Party, social. Like, I mean, if you can't fight against Nazis, like if you can't put your shit aside to fight against Nazis, then I don't know what to tell you. Like, the goal of Nazism is to seize power and cleanse the society of subhumans. That's the goal, the stated agenda. If Nazis are not saying that, then they're not Nazis. It's a defining characteristic of their ideology. And like, if you're not willing to put aside like, well, this guy is a neoliberal. This guy thinks that he should that he should operate in a wage slave society. So I can't ally with him, even though he's also against Nazis. Like, get over yourself. Like, fucking get over yourself. Nazis, dude. Like, Nazis. To me, I don't view this as like it's like a force, it's like a tidal wave is coming, right? And instead of you saying, like, we got to get everybody into the bunker, you're like trying to create a means test of checkmark. Like, no. Tsunami coming, get everybody safe, right? Like, it's like what I've been saying this whole time, right? Humanity first, right? Humanity, then it's humanity, class, politics, identity. That's how I view it, right? And Nazis take class. Basically, Nazis take humanity and eliminate it. It's not even a consideration for them, right? So that's what makes them so abhorrent. But if you're going to try and take politics or class and put it above humanity, then what's going on here? Like, what's going on here? Nazis are bad. I don't know why I need to explain it. Like, it's and like what this is really convincing me of is that we are a fake society. Like, we're just a business. Like, we're just a series of businesses, and there's this theatrical edifice that exists called the Parliament, right, that we all vote for and elect and all that kind of stuff in this, like, big theatrical display. But it operates completely and exclusively on behalf of these business interests. And so any society that exists, like, we can't figure out that Nazis are bad. Like, what the fuck? Like, we there's something wrong with us. Like, there's something very wrong with us. And what's wrong with us is that we're not actually a society. Russia is a hyper-reactionary nationalist state. If you think the reason they went into Ukraine is to get rid of Nazis, you're not that bad. That was their Cassius Belli, first of all. So your argument is basically that we handed them the Cassius Belli we needed in order to achieve their objectives. So who's not bright in that conversation, right? And also, so what if what you're saying is true? Like, so what, right? Are you denying that there are Nazis there? Are you denying that there are state-funded Nazis there? That kind of denialism is very difficult for me to tolerate, right? Like, there are state-funded operating Nazis that we and NATO and Ukraine itself directly fund. They're the only country in the world that are doing it, right? And, like, I call Putin a petty king. Like, I don't know what you need here. Like, even if everything you say about Putin is accurate, he should still go in and fuck up Nazis. Like, and yeah, I do think Putin actually has more authority as to what happens on his own border. Like, the Russians probably have a better opinion and a better position to deal with crises on their own border than we do. Like, this commentary that says, like, Russia is a hyper-reactionary nationalist state. Yeah, they're still better than Nazis. Like, like, for fuck's sake, like, my grandparents fought Nazis. Like, your grandparents likely fought Nazis. Right? There was a massive war effort to fight Nazis. And now we're just supposed to be, like, neutral on Nazis. Now the Nazis don't matter. Like, now we're just not supposed to talk about the Nazis. Like, no. I think the Nazis are probably the most important thing to talk about. Like, there's a reason why the media doesn't want to talk about Nazis. There's a reason why nobody wants to focus on the reality that there are Nazis, right? Because if we realize that there's, like, state-funded and operate, and my favorite is people walking around being like, well, there are Nazis in Russia too. They're not state-backed. They're not part of the Russian military, right? Like, we have Nazis here too, but they're not part of the Canadian government, right? Like, they're like, every society is going to have these fringe far-right movements and all of this kind of stuff. Like, you'll never actually get rid of them, right? They're like a plague. They're like a disease that exists in our societies, right? But if they suddenly become integrated with the state and they get military control and start to get military funding from the state, from your taxes, yeah, I'd say that's a problem. I'd say that's a pretty major problem. In fact, I would say that's the major problem, right? Why? Because Nazis want to ethnically cleanse places. That's their stated objective. Like, I don't know what we need anymore. Like, what do we need here? Do we genuinely need to go through another like Nazi world war? Like, is that what we actually need? Like, are we capable of learning lessons? Are we capable of it? I don't think so. Like, I really don't. Like, I really think that we are. There are far right militias that are funded by the Russian state. Yeah, I don't deny that there are right wing militias that are funded by the Russian state. Are they Nazis? This is so fucking exhausting, dude. This is so fucking exhausting. There's a difference. Like, there's a difference. It's too much for me, man. It's too fucking much. And time will tell with this. Like, time will tell with this. We're going to see what Russia's going to do, right? Is Russia just going to occupy Ukraine? Probably not, actually. Like, probably not. Yeah, the Wagner Group. Yes, the true villains the whole time are the real Nazis are the people, and like, it becomes somewhat incoherent in my view, because like, Putin is putting forward bills in the UN calling for the banning of the glorification of Nazism, right? Like, like, even if you believe he's this like Machiavellian genius, like, if this is the thing that kills me the most about this conversation, if you believe that he's this Machiavellian genius, then we've given him everything he needs. Like, we've completely played into his hand, like, totally. Will you eat your words if they do occupy Ukraine or install a puppet government? Not really. Like, I mean, I've been fairly clear about my position about Putin. He's a petty king. Like, he's a petty king, but a petty king is better than a Nazi, right? Like, and my opinion of Putin is going to be greatly colored by what happens next. Absolutely. Like, my opinion of Putin is that he's a petty king who is an opportunist, who rules from a right-wing position. Like, he's not that much different than a right-wing Republican in America. Like, that's the thing that makes it so, like, hilarious to me, that we're supposed to be demonizing this guy, but it's like, what? He's like a Republican. Like, so, like, he's not a fucking Nazi. And if he occupies Ukraine, I'll stand out against that for sure. Like, and if he installs a puppet government, this is where it gets difficult, right? Because NATO supporters and people and Westerners will always call it a puppet government. It will always be considered a puppet government, right? That's literally what they called the previous government while they were cooing it. They were like, it's a Putin puppet government anyway, right? So like, and obviously Russia is going to have an enormous impact on the, he is like a neocon. Zelensky is as Nazi. Look, here's the thing about Zelensky, about the current leader. Zelensky. I get the previous leader and the new leader confused sometimes in my brain because I'm the best at what I do. The one who is really fueling this is the Ministry of the Interior, right? And I suspect that Zelensky is, like, we are seeing the danger of having like an opportunistic leader, right? Because an opportunistic leader, like this is exactly the critique I levy at someone like Trump, right? Trump himself is not a Nazi, right? Trump isn't even a fascist, right? He just doesn't care if the people around him are Nazis and fascists, right? It's very much the same with Zelensky, I think. That, like, he just doesn't care if there are Nazis and fascists, as long as they do what he says. That's all he cares about. And there just comes a point where you're like, okay, well, where's the difference? Like, what's the difference? Yeah. Exactly, Legundis. Like basically what the critique of like groups like the Wagner Group or the state-funded stuff is, they're trying to say that like because the Russians fund like what are ostensibly like right-wing groups, that's as bad as Nazis. And it isn't. Like, again, Putin is a petty king. Like, I'm not trying to say that Putin's the future of the world and we should all love him and oh my God, everything he does is the best and all that. Let's get away from that nonsense. He's a petty king. He's a Tsar, right? A neo-Tsar. I think that's what Watson called it. And you're correct, Watson. Lenin did not actually say this, right? I love it though. I love it. I'm absolutely gonna keep this one around because like it's so like when I saw this I just started laughing and it like was so like had a catharsis of release for me because it's that riff on there are decades where nothing happens and there are weeks where decades happen and or days or I don't remember the exact quote but the and this is so perfect, right? There are decades where we fuck around and weeks where we find out. Yeah. Do you think, again, dude, like, do you think Putin doesn't shell innocent people? Are we forgetting his complete demolition of Chechnya? Like, again, Putin is a petty king, not a Nazi. Like, when Putin does things, it's politically motivated and opportunistic. Like someone like Donald Trump. Like someone like Joe Biden, right? He's not calling for the ethnic cleansing of a people. He's not writing stuff talking like I don't know why this I don't know why this isn't connecting for you, Ryan. Like I don't know what like literally every challenge you're saying, I'm saying the same thing. Like Putin is a petty king, still better than a Nazi. Like Putin is doing this, still better than a Nazi. And honestly, if you take all of the like sins of Putin, and they're sins, you're bringing them up, right? And line them up against literally any United States president, like literally any. Like, there's an equivalency, right? But if you take the sins of Putin and line them up, so you support invading of everywhere Nazis, state-funded Nazis? Yeah. Like, let's not be insane. Nazis are always going to exist. Like I just said, they're a disease. It's a plague. It's something that you have to constantly check in on. It's the reason why you want to have a society and a civilization, right? So that you can actually like take care of this issue. And if you don't have a society or a civilization, that's where the Nazis seize state power, right? Like, yeah, you're right, Watson, but guess what? That's the job. Like, that's the job, bud. The job is to compare piles of dog shit. Like, that's the job, Watson. That's the job. Comrade Stannis, I love it. Is that come on now. Is that a Game of Thrones reference, bud? I love it. Hello, new to this channel. Good to see you, bud. Hope you're here to participate. We try to be friendly with one another, right? We try to be nice to one another. Song of Ice and Fire, you got it, bud. You know what, man? That makes you welcome more than anything. Like, what they fucking did to Season 8 was an abomination. Fuck those guys. Sounds like George Bush talking about state-funded terrorism. I don't really know what that's in reference to. Like, that, which is ironic because, I mean, George Bush funded state-funded terrorism. Like, oh, I see what you're saying. You're saying, like, we gotta fight the enemy wherever. Look, Ukraine is the only nation on the planet right now that has state-funded Nazism, right? And Nazism can be cleanly defined. Terrorism cannot, right? Like, I'm really struggling to understand why you're struggling to grab hold of this. Like, Nazis are bad. Their ideology is clearly stated. Should they seize state power, we should fight them. And on it, we should fight them within our own countries. Like, we as Canadians don't have the right to go into, like, Albania and start fighting them because they have Nazis, because it's up to every society and civilization to fight against their own Nazi issue. But if you're literally sharing a border with a country and that country starts funding state Nazis, yeah, you got the right to fight them. And if those Nazis are fucking with you, yeah, you got the right to go in there and fuck them up. You do. Right? Nazis are bad. I don't know why this is a struggle. Like, why is this a struggle? Yeah, don't let the West take control. Don't let the West coup places. I mean, like, and we have our own internal struggle with Nazism, right? And what's great about this conversation is that part of the issue with our own internal struggle with Nazis is that when we fund Nazi groups in Ukraine, which we do, right, it circles back around, and those Nazis, those state-funded integrated Nazis, turn around and support our neo-Nazi groups, right? So the Canadian government funds Nazis. Those Nazis fund Nazis in Canada. What are those Nazis trying to do? Seize power, right? Like, yeah, we should stop this. Like, we should fucking stop this. People today can actually adore vile historical figures like Xiao Xiao from Chinese history, but they can't stand Putin. Yeah. I don't necessarily know this figure, Xiao Xiao, but I'll take your word for it, bud. Like, yeah, it is like when we talk about certain figures in history, we do have this who has this? Like Genghis Khan has this. Like, we talk about Genghis Khan with this, like, admiration almost. We're like, wow, I can't believe. Or like Alexander the Great, or any of these guys, right? And we have this real, like, oh, wow, what an incredible, like, that kind of... and then there's, like, this afterthought of, like, he was a bad person, though. Oh, yes, of course. The Taliban offered to turn over bin Laden before the U.S. invaded. They just necessitated that he not receive the death penalty. Yeah. The Nazis are nowhere close to seizing state power in Ukraine. What are you talking about? They're literally backed by the Minister of the Interior. They're officially integrated into the military. If that's not state power, bud, I don't know what it is. Like, I don't know why I'm getting Nazi apologetics here. Like, what's with the Nazi apologetics, bro? Like, for real, what's with the Nazi apologetics? Like, big question marks starting to come up here, bud. Big question marks. Like, why are you acting as a Nazi apologist? The Azov Battalion was receiving state-funded, state funding. The Interior, the reason why is because the Minister of the Interior, is the Minister of the Interior not state? Is that not state power? The Minister of the Interior isn't state power in your mind. Is that right? Is that right? But they aren't in power. Ukraine is just a flawed bourgeoisie democracy. I mean, it's not a democracy currently. There was a coup in 2014. They just installed their own fucking people. Like, sure, technically there was like a vote, but they literally banned the communists from participating. Like, to call it an election, it's a total fucking farce. Like, so is your argument literally that because the Nazis weren't 100% into, like the swastika wasn't completely, it hadn't elevated to that position yet? Like, this is like telling me, like, you shouldn't fight cancer because it's not currently, like, terminal. Like, that's your argument, bud. Like, we shouldn't fight cancer until it's terminal. I hate Nazi fascist apologetics. They don't deserve freedom of speech. I mean, that's like the Chinese position, right? Like the Chinese, the National People's Congress, they straight up are just like, nope, right-wing reactionaries do not get power at all, and they don't get to speak in our nation, period. They're out, right? And this is really convincing me that that's the correct way to go. Like, yeah, right-wing reactionaries and like far-right Nazis, yeah, they don't get to stand up and have a voice. Right. That's why China chases out groups like Falun Gong, like these fucking racial purity cults and all this crazy shit. And yeah, tell the people of Donbass that those fucking Nazis aren't in control, bud. Like literally, they gathered people up and burnt them in the square of Donbass shelled them for 8 years. Yeah, tell the people of Donbass that those Nazis aren't in control. I want Russia to wipe out the Azov. I didn't hear the Minister of Interior had done that. I mean, the reason the Azov Battalion is in this conversation at all is because of the Minister of Interior. I highly recommend to everybody. I put it in today's video. YouTube. I put a clip of it in today's video. Gravel Institute Ukraine. I highly advise that everybody watch this video. Like this video is probably one of the more important videos on the subject because it's fairly clear cut and comprehensive. Like this is the Gravel Institute's, and they get very much into the connections. Like I use a clip from this video in my video, and like it's and I mean, you know it's good because Vosh is acting as a Nazi apologist for it. So that's how you know it's good. Yeah, I mean, the issue really kicked off in 2014. Like 2014 is when it really became a major crisis, right? Like that's when the coup happened. Like the Azov Battalion had always been in Ukraine, but it wasn't a like state-backed piece of their infrastructure. And the reason why people like why these leaders are turning to the Azov Battalion is because they had exhausted the rest of their military, right? Like their military was basically already defeated, right? There's 4 ministers or Nazi leaders in Ukraine government. I got told to move to Russia because I was against Russia vodka being removed from shelves. I know, right? What a weird story. Like what a weird, like this is so petty. Ontario directing LCBO to remove all Russian products. Like I don't think it gets pettier than this. But it really does tell you, like, this is how Canadians talk. Like this is how they do politics, right? Alcohol is Canadian politics. Like if something's happening in the LCBO, all Canadians know about it all the time, right? Because we're just a fucking nation of drunks, really. But it's so fucking petty. Like, it's so fucking just like... And all this kind of stuff is going to do, right? And all, like, the sanctions that they're putting on and everything, it's just going to chase Russia into the hands of the Chinese. And it's going to firm up these... alliances that the West is creating its own enemies and creating like its own boogeyman, but now which it's always done, but it's a little bit different now because it's like when it was fighting against the Soviet Union, it wasn't actively creating the Soviet Union, right? Like it wasn't encouraging people to become part of the Soviet Union, and the boogeymaning that exists throughout American history is there. But now it's going to blow up in our faces in a huge way because it's the only way that we interact with foreign politics. Like fundamentally, guys, the reason why I'm so passionate about this is first of all, fuck Nazis, right? But there is also an element of like, can't we just interact in the world in a nice way? Like, do you know how easy it would have been to de-escalate this? Like, do you really understand how easy it would have been to de-escalate this from the American perspective, right? From the perspective of NATO. Like, this is what makes this conversation so fucking annoying and infuriating. That Russia would not have invaded Ukraine if NATO had have said, oh, bro, my bad. We're going to pull back from Ukraine, and we're just going to stop funding those neo-Nazi groups. We're done. Like, we're done. Right? It would have been almost nothing from the American perspective. Like, literally. Just like, oh, yeah, let's just pull back. We're just not going to do our bad. But they can't. Like, they can't do that. because it's like a baby. Like, you've got to teach a baby to, like, when I was a kid, do you know what my mom used to do to me and my sister when we would get into fights? She was, and this was quite wise of her in retrospect, because she understood that we would never actually apologize to one another genuinely, right? So what she did is she forced us to grab each other's hands and say, and no word of a lie, "You're my sister and I love you, please forgive me." And then she would say, "You're my brother and I love you, please forgive me." And the whole thing was so lame that by the end of it, we had lost the thread of why we were mad at each other in the first place, and the emotions had come down and all of this kind of stuff. But what it fundamentally taught me is that if you are wrong, you should just go like, "My bad," and back out, right? Just, "Okay, my bad." Admit you're wrong, right? Admit you're wrong. But this seems to be impossible for people, and certainly for nations, right? To just be like, oh shit, right? It's easier for us to accept threat of war and war itself than it is for us to accept, "Oh yeah, my bad," right? And honestly, I think the Americans would have come off looking a lot better on the world stage. Like, domestically, because of how bloodthirsty and insane Americans actually are, they'd probably be like, "He apologized? And weakness, where's the blood?" Right? Yeah, why is NATO still around? Yeah, NATO exists to destroy Russia. Like, and this point seems to also be lost. Right? NATO exists to destroy Russia. Oh, Stannis, let's not open this can of worms, okay? Let's not get into the Stalinist or the Trotsky thing, right? We have both in the chat, and there's a long history of and Ryan's getting in on it too. Let's just pump the brakes here. Let's just pump the brakes. Everybody, pump the brakes. I will put people in timeout. I understand the Trotsky, Stalin, like what is true Leninism, all of that. We get it, okay? We get it. Interesting conversations to have, certainly, but I'm over it. I'm over it. I'm over it. And you know what, man? Young Trotsky. Look at this beautiful man. Look at this fucking beautiful guy. Don't you love it? Don't you love him? Here, we're going to open up this image. Right? This is what we're going to do. This is how I love to deal with the Stalin Trotsky kind of thing. And you're new, comrade. You're new, Stannis. So I appreciate it. I appreciate it. Like, you're gonna find there's Stalinists in here, and I have been called a Stalinist apologist and all that kind of stuff. And there's Trotskyists in here, right? And young Stalin. Look at this beautiful boy. Look at this beautiful boy. Look at this beautiful boy. Look at these beautiful boys. Huh? These beautiful fucking boys. Why couldn't they just get their shit together, right? Why couldn't these beautiful boys just put aside their differences, right? Why couldn't these beautiful boys just put aside their differences? Barnabas, you too, bud, okay? Pump the brakes, okay? I get it. Like, these two had a big fight. And it's created, a long-lasting schism, right? And we got anarchists. Thank you, Eric. Yeah, we got anarchists in the chat too, right? And the and I don't. Stalin probably did get some tail back then, dude. Look at this guy. Are you kidding me? Look at this guy. And the what am I trying to fucking say? Oh yeah. My position on all of this, the Stalinist, Trotskyist, Maoist, Dengist, Marxist, Leninist, Marxist, all of this kind of stuff. like all of this kind of stuff, right? Is that I'm not a fundamentalist about any of it. Like, there are things, of course, that are true, right? There is such a thing as objective historical fact, right? Like, that's true. But more or less, I see the humanity of all of these figures and all of these guys, and oftentimes I feel like that humanity gets put aside in favor of like a political battle. And I find that to be kind of tedious, honestly. Like, these men were incredible figures that were dealing with an insane idea. The first time any nation attempted to embark on a Marxist society, it was destined for failure. No, and of course, and my position on Trotsky is he's obviously a genius. Like, read anything he wrote. He's obviously a genius. He's smarter than Stalin, for sure. Like, I think if you're a Stalinist, you've got to admit it. Like, you got to admit it. Like, Trotsky was definitely a genius, but at the end of the day, Stalin's the better politician. Proof's in the pudding, right? Who became the leader of Russia? How did he do it? You know? And the real tragedy of these two men, is that they weren't able to navigate the difficult waters of what I consider to be their fundamental own humanity. Their own humanity, right? Like, if they had been able to come to terms with the disagreements and actually join forces again, I think I know for a fact it would have made the Soviet Union stronger. For sure. Like, if Stalin had been able to tolerate Trotsky as a critic, because that's who Trotsky would have been, without a doubt, right? If Stalin had been able to tolerate Trotsky as a critic, and if Trotsky had been able to set aside his own opinions for the consensus, then things would have definitely moved forward in a beautiful way. Yeah, thank the Trotskyists for the Marxist Internet Archive. Yeah. No, dude, like, and the people who I organize with are wonderful people. Really, and you know what, man? The Trotskyists show up. Like, the Trotskyists show up. Say what you want, right? You can have differences of opinion and all that. Trotskyist shows up, man. They show up. So I try really hard to, like, say positive things about all sides and to not be a fundamentalist and acknowledge the conflict, but for way too long, this conflict has been tearing us apart. And that's the real shameful legacy of all of it. And we got to get over it. Like, we really do. We got to get over it. All right. I'm going to move on from this. Fucking handsome dude. Oh, one picture that I got to show you guys about Stalin. This one. Look at this shit. Gen Z, dude. Gen Z. You gotta love them. I love those kids, man. I love those kids. This shit's hilarious. All right. Yeah, of course. No, of course, Stannis. Like, it's and that's just it. Like, it's exhausting, and it's spinning tires, right? It doesn't. You never reconcile anything, right? Horvath's NDP calls for funding for Ukrainian aid, Russia vodka ban. Yeah, that's political opportunism, right? Like, oh yeah, now we're gonna fund Ukraine, right? Like, oh, we should help Ukraine. Like, where were you when the Nazis were bombing Donbass for the last 8 years, right? Where were you? No, it's the NDP are just like less and less impressive to me as time goes forward, man. Like, they're so fucking weak. Leader Andrew Horvath says humanitarian aid from Ukraine from Ontario should be in the tens of millions. Yeah, yesterday the Ford government announced $300,000 in aid. Like, it's just political opportunism, right? They don't care about Ukraine. Like, they don't care. And hey, how about $300,000 for, I don't know, our own homeless? How about we're going to send aid to Ukraine because they're dealing with a problem that our own government created or helped create. Which isn't to say, like, I mean, the Ukrainian citizens are certainly, like, there was a fellow in yesterday. He was in a bomb shelter. I mean, if he's to be believed, who knows? But, like, he's dealing with this crisis and on a very human level. It's got to be scary as shit for the Ukrainian people. That's scary as shit. Like, holy fuck. Right? You got fucking helicopters and jet fighters flying over your city. Right? You got infrastructure getting bombed. I mean, fuck. That's crazy, dude. Grinning, you got me, dude. I can't help myself. Don't talk about Stalin Trotsky. Proceeds to fully reconcile the opposing sides. Oh, fuck you. Why can't we all just get along? Yeah, Aaron Mate will be on Jimmy Dore at 7. Yeah, Aaron Mate, very, very powerful commentator. Very powerful commentator, right? Hey, Nut Milk, how you doing, bud? Good to see you. What's up, Kami? Man, I honestly had no idea our country trained neo-Nazis in Ukraine. Just finished watching a documentary on the Azov Battalion. What's even more insane is that Israel, of course Israel's involved in it. What was the name of that documentary, bro? Like, I'm actually very curious to know. All right, Brian. So I'm not. Communism has to be about overcoming the law of value and commodity of production. Socialist commodity production isn't a real thing. Hold on, what's that? Communism has to be about overcoming the law of value and commodity production. Socialist commodity production isn't a real thing. I mean, what? Like, I'm not sure I understand what you mean here, Ryan. Sorry. It's always funny that there's always deep pockets for war, but no money for improving the quality of life at home. Yeah. Yep. Infinite money for war, right? Like, you can give as much money as you like to war. Like, and it just goes to show you, like, war is its own force, right? It's its own thing. That's the reason why. And the Grecians were very astute in this way. They gave war its own god. Like, that's very astute. Like, that's a very deep thinking, philosophical thing to have done as a society. To, like, because, like, you can imagine, like, the god of thunder, right? The god of lightning, right? Like the god of the earth, right? God of agriculture, right? Like, that's pretty straightforward shit. But the god of war, that's cool. That's interesting, and it's very true. Like, war takes on its own thing, and that's really what makes this situation scary for lots of Westerners, because we don't like to pay attention to war in, like, Africa or South America or the Middle East or any of that. That's whatever. That's just, you know, we own those places anyway. Haha, West. But this is war with a nuclear power. Like, that's what's really got people's backs up, if you ask me. Right? This is war with a nuclear power. And, like, There's the element of, like, we have to admit that there are other countries who also have their own spheres of influence, and we can't just it's irrational for us to believe that they should just do what we say, like, and that we can't just enforce our will through force. So there's a lot of, like, dealing with the reality that that's the case. Like, over those hills is another group of monkeys, and we have to accept that those group of monkeys exist. Like, that's the kind of thinking that we're talking about here, and we're trying to reconcile that. We're trying to come to terms with that. But then there's also just the fact that, like, oh yeah, Russia's got nukes. Yeah, Russia's got nukes. Yeah, really spices it up. Like the Kiss tune. Exactly, bud. Exactly. You know what's up. You know what's up. Marx talks about that. No, I understand this, bud, but I just don't understand it in the context that you're giving it to me. Like, just because you're saying buzzwords doesn't mean it makes sense. Ontario legislature returns on the 28th, and there are already talks about the majority of the question period being about Ukraine. What about unhoused in Ontario? What about capitalism, crickets? Yeah, and like, don't get me wrong. Like, there should be a big question period and big talks about Ukraine in the Ontario legislature. Guarantee that the Nazi question is not raised. Just as a guarantee. Like, all of this is political theater. Like, when Justin Trudeau stands up and says, like, this attack was unprovoked, it's like, what? What are you talking about? It was unprovoked. Like, what in the actual fuck are you talking about? It's an unprovoked attack. Like, it's the definition of provoking an attack. Like, if you saw someone, like, punching someone in the arm over and over and over again, and then that person who's getting punched in the arm hauls off and punches the person who's punching them in the arm, knocking them out, are you going to stand up and be like, what an unprovoked attack? Because that's what we're doing. Like, that's what our politics is. It's ridiculous. Telling Freedom Convoy guys CBC is lying about Ukraine like they lied about the convoy kind of works. Yeah, I think that's right, Hydraulic. I think, like, this is an interesting intersection, right? Because the convoy guys are like, boo state power and like, boo Justin Trudeau and boo all that. Unless it comes to going to war against Russia, I guess. Like, but this speaks to sort of the incoherence of that group. Like, they don't really have a coherent system. Like, they really just, they just know that, they just know that things have gone wrong. That's it. That's as far as they've gotten. Which is why I've always been a bit sympathetic to them. Because, like, they know something's gone wrong and they're willing to fight for it. I can respect that. Just on a one-to-one kind of human basis. Like, the mythical narrative that I was told would exist in my lifetime is not manifesting and I'm upset about it. Yeah, I can get it. I can roll with it. I think North America has a lot of leftist sentiment under the surface, but we have a million or billion groups not connected together. There's that too. We need to think how to link the movement. I know, right? Like, that's a big part of it. It is a big part of it. I try to keep that hope up as well. Like, this moment is really like the amount of leftist sentiment that actually exists in the society. Like, there's a lot of, let's try to use a term. There's a lot of like bourgeois leftism. There's a lot of just like theoretical leftism. There's a lot of like head tilting going like, leftism. A lot of thoughts and prayers leftism. That's what it is. So it's a lot of like, I hope things get better for you. Anyway, vote liberal, right? Like, there's a lot of that going on where like they're on your side in the abstract theory space. And then you're like, hey, do you want to actually come and do something about it? And they're like, I'm getting my nails done that day. You know, there's a lot of that going on. You're paid less with the commodity thing you make. Yes, but not for exchange value. Things are produced directly for use. Yeah, again, I'm not really connecting to, like, I don't think I understand the thesis of what we're talking about is the problem. Like, yeah, not for the exchange value? Like, yeah, you're not paid for the exchange value because the capitalist takes it. Like, I just don't, like, what's the point here? Anyway. Clearly, 2020 and the labor struggles increased from 2021 to 2022, that they're increasing in sentiment. That is true. I think that that COVID has really slowed us down in a lot of ways. There's a lot of hesitancy on the left because of COVID. People don't want to gather in large groups, and leftists are more often to, follow the advice of doctors and things. In the USA and Mexico, not sure about Canada, there's a lot of labor struggles increasing. Yeah, mutual aid groups, seeing a lot of that. Who is the Greek god of war? Ares, right? Yeah, the Greek god of war is Ares. God of war. Yeah. Ares. Nailed it. We need to link movement before establishing dual power. Yeah. CPUSA, how if the CPUSA dropped other chapters for sticking to a Soviet line. This is what I'm talking about. Like, I just feel like there's a lot of conceding what's going on in reality because of something that happened 100 years ago. The Soviet Union, things were generally produced for use value first and exchange value second. And I'm pretty sure that Engels says On Authority and the Manifesto, the dictatorship of the proletariat is the condition of the proletariat holding state power. Yeah. I just don't think I understand what's being said. Like, a socialist society will continue to produce commodities. Like, is that what we're debating? Like, yeah, a socialist society will continue producing commodities. Of course it will. Like, of course it will. Producing shit and making shit is like intrinsic to the human experience. There are people who just make shit because they want to. Like, I don't really get what's being made, like the claim that's being made here, or the critique that's even being made. Like, of course, socialist countries will continue producing stuff. They'll just produce it for the benefit of the people, and people will produce it because they believe it's going to improve the conditions. It won't be for a profit motive. It won't be because they're like, oh, this will make me abstract money dollars that I can then turn around or offshore or do any of that kind of stuff. It'll be a group of people getting together being like, hey, we should produce chairs because people want chairs. Part of the issue, of course, like part of what's interesting about what's going on today is that we have so much shit. Like, we have so much shit. There's secondary and tertiary markets that have now arisen that are extremely robust, like thrift shops, right? Not only do you have like places like Value Village that are just like a Walmart of secondhand shit, but then you have underneath that a tertiary economy of thrift shops that go through places like Value Village and curate the the secondhand shit. Like, we've got so much shit, you guys. Like, we've got so much shit. We made a ton of shit. We got too much shit. Like, if somebody wants to stand up and make the argument to me that, like, oh, a socialist country, it'll produce less, I'm going to kind of be like, yeah, and? Because we really are producing shit for the sake of producing shit. We throw so much shit away. Like, and just the idea is that more shit is good. And it's just like, I don't know, it seems a bit much. Non-Western god pantheons, same old Greek old god pantheon that we see everywhere in fiction nowadays. Absolutely. Oh yeah, I used to talk a lot more about this, Stannis, that the gods didn't die, they just rebranded as brands, right? Think about like Nike, for example. Like in ancient Greek lore, Nike is Greek god. Nike is the goddess of victory, right? And victory and sport, right? And what was the procedure? Well, there would be a temple with the goddess Nike on it, and you would go in to the temple, take money, give it to the people working in the temple, get a token that you would wear, and that would bestow you with the grace of Nike, and you would receive victory and sport in your sports or in your endeavors, right? Okay, well, what happens now? You walk into a store, right? A temple. You pick out whatever icon thing that has a little swoop on it, right? And the swoop is now the rebranded, like, instead of it being the face or the personification, it's this abstract sort of postmodern version of Nike. And you wear it, and that's supposed to present you as a follower and acolyte of Nike and bestow you with the graces of Nike. It's the same. Like, it's the same. The gods didn't die, they just rebranded. They're all still around. It's all the same stuff, right? Like, we've just instead of it being a person, it's like a little swoop check mark, right? Instead of it being like what's another really good example? For God's sakes, like Thor is in our movies. Like Thor's like walking around with his fucking hammer, being like, "Yo, what's up?" Like, and we love it. We fucking love it. So apparently, there's another Toronto protest tomorrow at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Queen's Park. Of course, Vince, that protest that you're talking about has been going on since the beginning of the pandemic. Every day at 12 p.m., the anti-vaxxers got together and have been creating a protest movement. It's the largest protest movement in Toronto. It's not well reported because, the power structure doesn't want to report on it. But anytime any protest of any size or scale happens at 12 p.m. at Queen's Park on a Saturday, it's these guys, right? That during the convoy movement, like there are pictures of these guys, they've all got Canadian flags and all this kind of stuff. It's them. And who are they? The anti-vaxxers, right? And that's not to condemn what they're doing. It's just to say what it is, right? Like, when that movement was first started, you can see I got videos on it. I went down to that movement, and I would talk to these guys, and they were very clear about their position on COVID. COVID doesn't exist. It's all a government conspiracy, right? And like it's morphed and changed and become different and presented itself as different, and like different people have come in, others have left. Like but the movement itself has taken on its own kind of energy. In a way, it's its own kind of god, right? Like it's the god of I don't know, far right protest, whatever you want to call it. And if to connect it to our conversation about Nazis, like if Nazis start to show up in Toronto, that's where they are. Like that is where they are. Like it's well understood. I had people on the show talking about what these people would do is they would have the protest, and then a group of them would offshoot and go harass some minority group or some business owner who's a minority owner. And sometimes it really was as cynical as like the business owner, a business owner would be would take a group of these guys and go harangue one of his rivals, right? Like as petty as that. And so yeah, like that Toronto protest is ongoing. It's a right wing at best, a right wing protest movement that has been going on since the beginning of COVID, since the very beginning, almost day one, right? So RT has a really good article that punches through the narrative that Russia is the aggressor. I mean, of course RT does, Eric. RT is Russian television. Which isn't to say we shouldn't listen to them. Like I don't take a hardline position on this. Like as long as you understand that what you're watching is state media, like as long as that's what you understand, then it's fine, right? I think that way about CBC. I think that way about BBC. I think that way about RT, about China television, right? All that kind of stuff. Like it's like I've had people be like, "Well, this is just China's state propaganda. Oh, and you're just saying what the Chinese propaganda is saying." And I'm just like, well, yeah, but like, we know, like, are they wrong? That's what I care about. And it's difficult to know if you're right or wrong, right? Like that's what makes this a job, right? That's what makes this a real task. There are a lot of pro-peace, anti-NGO, NATO protests happening in the USA right now. Media, of course. That's how you know, right? I definitely don't have it at my fingertips, but I definitely saw, like, if you go to a Ukrainian protest, like a pro-Ukrainian protest where there's Ukrainian flags and all this kind of stuff, like, you'll see, like, maybe 100 people show up, and the media is hyper-focusing on it and super covering it. I've been to protests, like the pro-Palestinian protest that happened here in Toronto had 10,000 people at it. It was enormous. It was a huge protest, right? Protest. It was a huge protest. So huge that the Zionists that showed up had to be escorted out because there was like 50 of them, right? And it was so funny because the police had actually like put a line of gates right down the court, right? Half of it was for the pro-Palestinians and half of it was for the Zionists. right? Literally fucking like 10,000 people show up on the Palestinian side. 50 people show up, and I've got footage of that on my channel, and it you got to dig for it, I'm sure, but that makes it worthwhile, Adam. Thanks, bud. Thanks for the videos past 2 days. You nailed it. Thanks, bud. I appreciate that, dude. I really do. These last 2 days, I've lost more. Think about this. I have lost more subscribers over these 2 videos than I did over the Uyghur genocide stuff. That the Uyghur genocide stuff, I lost subscribers, but not like this. Like, this was like a chunk down. And my position on it is good riddance. Like, good riddance to these guys. I don't need Nazi sympathizers following me. I'm not interested in that. If I'm going to lose subscribers because I stand up and say Nazis are bad and we should fight them, yeah. Also, Putin isn't Russia. Recognizing Donbass was brought forward by the Communist Party, I think. Donsk, and that's another part of it, right? Like, people have critiqued me and been like, Russia isn't even communist. What? They're a capitalist nation. Like, what's up? And I'm just like, yeah, but like, they're still Russians. Like, they're still fucking Russians. They still have this history of communism. They still have this kind of stuff. Like, Putin isn't anti-communist. Like, that's something that's interesting about Putin. Like, you can tell that the legacy of communism is so well respected amongst the Russian people that even the person who is like currently ruling as like a Tsar isn't really willing to like condemn these figures or talk shit about them. He very rarely talks about them. And when he talked about Lenin, his statements on Lenin were fairly moderate. Like, fairly moderate. Like, I think that the big thing that Putin said about Lenin was Lenin was a revolutionary, he wasn't a statesman. And, like, that's only really a critique if you think that Tsarism is okay. Like, and that's what really tipped the hand to the rest of the world and to Russia itself, that Putin really does view himself as a Tsar, that the Tsars were statesmen. Lenin was a revolutionary, right? And so, like, Putin knows that he can't alienate these people directly. And also, I think there is just kind of a base human element of this. Like, how long can you tolerate this? Like the people of Donbass are Russian, right? They are. They're Russian. That Ukraine, like, Ukraine was part of the Soviet Union for longer than it's been independent. Like, the history there is rich and dense and real. And it's got to be a real striking point for Russians. Forget about communists. Forget about all of that. For just a human being who is a Russian to look across a border and go, there are also Russians there, and those Russians are being bombed and burned by Ukrainians. And we're going to do nothing. We're going to just stand by and watch that happen. Like, I think on a very human level, Russian citizens are standing up and being like, yo, bro, like, what's the story? What's the story here? Yeah, 15 NATO bases. What do you mean provoke? If Putin didn't want to antagonize NATO, he shouldn't have put the Russian border next to all our military bases. I think a lot of people are considering making a new third party, a Labour left-wing, big tent Labour-esque political party. I hope it's legit. Get communist, socialist, liberals together in one tent. That's always been a conversation, right? Like, there are people working within the NDP in the hopes of doing that. It's just, it doesn't seem to be manifesting. Would another party actually be the thing? Because that's kind of what the NDP were created to do. They've just sort of lost the thread, frankly. What right-wing libertarian types ever have a coherent message? Exactly. True freedom is selling yourself to corporations. I'm coming to the conclusion that Ukraine is not morally pure, and Russia isn't morally pure. It's hard to cheer for either side when it's Nazis versus oligarchs. I do disagree. Grinning. I mean, I understand your position. If I have to pick between Nazis and oligarchs, I choose oligarchs. Why? Because Nazis are worse than oligarchs. Very, 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 very clean cut. Like, oligarchs are bad. Certainly that's the case. Nazis are worse. Nazis are worse. And it's by a lot. Like, when you really pause, and I encourage everybody to take a breath and really pause and think about it. What is Nazism, right? What are these oligarchs doing? Well, you know what the oligarchs aren't doing? They're not literally writing literature about how we should systemically cleanse minority groups from our society, right? They're not actively pursuing, like, there isn't an active policy of segregation and elimination happening in the society right now. Like, we're dealing with the fallout of a lot of that shit, certainly, and we can debate the degree to which we're doing it, but you know what we're not doing? We're not actively, we're not rounding up, let's say, Jews, right? But the classic example, right? We're not rounding up Jews. We're not rounding up black people. We're not rounding up the Japanese. We're not doing any of that, right? We're not sending them to concentration camps and putting them in ovens and shit, like, and like, that's what Nazis do. And in a way, it's kind of, I do think there is an element that, like, people simply can't accept or imagine this. Like, they can't conceptualize and actually get in, like, they can't actually get into the abstract space of what Nazism actually is, right? That the human imagination, especially, like, in our society where imagination is so heavily suppressed, that actually expanding your imagination to get into a space of accepting that you could live in a society where, like, groups of people could be around, like, walk down the street into your convenience store. All right? There's a convenience store right down here, right? That I go to all the time. Great guy. The guy that owns the place is always there. Real great guy. Clearly, like, first generation immigrant. Real great guy. And imagine that guy just gets picked up, right? Why? Because he's not a true Canadian. He just gets picked up, gets rounded up, sent to a place, shot, burnt, right? And then the next time I go in there, who owns the place? Some fucking thuggish white dude, right? Like, the oligarchs aren't doing that. And I think a lot of what I think is actually happening is that we are struggling with getting in, because we're far enough removed from the history of Nazism, from the lived real experience of Nazism. Like, the people who actually were alive when that shit was going down have now passed on, and so we kind of lack the ability to exist in the abstract space far enough to really understand what Nazism actually is. And so we can kind of amorphously say, like, well, Nazism's bad and oligarchy is bad, so these two must be equivalents, and they're not. Like, and they're really not. Like, and the more you contemplate on it, and the more you really realize what Nazism is, and the more you create examples of what would happen in a Nazi society, the more you realize that that's the case. Like, every single time you see a minority group, just, they're shot and rounded up and gone, right? They're subhuman. Like, this is what Nazism is, and the oligarchs aren't doing that. Like, and we can critique them, and we can fight against them, and we should, and we can organize, and we should, right, and all that kind of stuff. But they are not the equivalent to Nazis. Like, they're not. And if an oligarch wants to fight a Nazi, let's go, Brandon. You guys are great, by the way, man. I'm so happy you guys are here. Yeah, Zionists got bodied. Yes, they did. That was fun. The worst part about it was that when I went to the Palestinian side to get footage and to hang out, the Palestinians thought I was part of the Zionist movement. That's because I did, like, a circle, and I think I came in to the protest, and so I got confronted by by some of the organizers, and they wanted me to stop filming, and I didn't really understand what was happening in the moment, so I got really like heightened. It wasn't until I connected with the Socialist Action guys that they left me alone, and then I sort of thought about like, okay, why did that happen? There were lots of people at the protest who were filming, and a lot of white people filming, and like in the Palestinian front. And I was like, why did this happen? And it really was because I was wearing not a cowboy hat, but definitely it had that leaning. Like it was a very rustic, rural hat, and I wore it because it was sunny that day, and I didn't want to get sunburned. But I think that really, like, I think I got profiled, is what happened. And that's not ill. Like I'm not mad about it. Like I'm not mad about it at all. And I wish I had I definitely wish I had acted differently, and been more. Like it just all happened at once, and there was so much fucking going on, and so. But it really grounded me afterwards. I really thought about it, and it really grounded me in a place of like, oh yeah, like me as a white Canadian. Like this issue exists very much in an abstract space for me, and it's not abstract for the organizers of this shit. That like there are white supremacists who will go after these people. Like that was a very humbling experience, and it was a teaching moment for me, so that if I get in that kind of situation again, I think I just need to learn to take a breath and move forward with a little bit more patience. Yeah. Anyway, that's a little side deviation for you, right? My confession. Sometimes I'm an asshole too. China will supply Russia with all energy. Yeah. No, I mean, the real loser in all of this, Barnabas. This is the thing that's so fucking stupid. Is that the real loser is going to be Germany and Europe. Right? Like, Russia can just shut off the energy. It's providing, like, Germany could go cold, man. Like, it could be a cold winter for the Germans. It's such a bad idea for them. But I think that a lot of it is like, America is trying to assert its dominance through NATO. And it's trying to reinforce its alliances. And it's trying to do it by the way it does. By being a big, giant fucking bully. Right? Wait a second, I didn't know that RT is Russian state television and there's a different outlet of RT. No, dude, RT is Russian television. Like it's and if it like there's RT America and there's RT Brit and there's RT Canada and there's RT this and RT that. It's all Russian state media. That's not to say like, and I don't demonize it. Chris Hedges has a show on Russian television, right? There are good people who are trying to do good work. And the outlet that they have found to do it is through RT. And I mean, it does kind of show you that, like, you know, I don't know why we should not, like, I watch the BBC and nobody says boo about that. I watch Russian television, suddenly, oh, like, what? What's going on here? Like, it's this othering of Russia that I find to be very interesting, whereas I really view Russia as just like another country, right? Like it has its own interests and it's going to pursue them, and if the power that it exerts on its own borders is it to exert, and it makes sense that it would want that. Like it's odd that when it comes to Russia specifically, if you make very clean, not controversial statements about Russia, people get really like it, and it's just like communism. It's like reefer madness. It's reefer madness. Like, yeah, Russia has authority and the right to negotiate and expect to be able to be a primary negotiator with countries that share a border with it. It's completely uncontroversial. Like, America has less authority on the Ukrainian-Russian border than both Ukraine and Russia. Completely uncontroversial. You say these things, and suddenly you're like you're like a Putin simp. Like, this is the shit that people call you, because you're like asserting the fact that Putin, like that Russia and Ukraine have more rights and authority on their own border than America does. Like, oh, okay, bro. Like that's 100% where we're at. Like, it's so fucking crazy. Yeah, here's the article, by the way. Like, I understand why people are also resistant to this, because it's not well shared. It's not well understood. You got to go to like the World Socialist website. There are articles in the Ottawa Citizen, but it's not like well proliferated. If Putin were around in 1917, he'd be a high-ranking member of the Black Hundreds. Yeah, I'd say that's pretty accurate, Watson. Yeah. I mean, play Disco Elysium on your free time, but definitely organize. Disco Elysium. Everybody tells me I should play Disco Elysium, and I played Disco Elysium through one time, and I was apolitical. I just decided I wanted to be apolitical while I was playing it. I didn't want to get all political about it. And had a great time. I feel like I should go through that game again, though, and very specifically be a communist. Just be a bravado-filled communist. I think it'd be a great time. I started to, and then what stopped me? I can't remember. An oligarchic Nazi. Hey, tacos for Jesus. Yeah, man, someone needs to find a picture of Jesus Christ, like, eating a taco. Just like, what a great picture that would be. I've been trying to, you know what, man? We're doing it. We're doing it. Jesus Christ eating a taco. I knew it. Thank you, Internet. Let's find a really good one. There's got to be a real good one. No, it's not like explicitly a taco. Here's a nice one. That's a good one. All right, tacos for Jesus. All right, it's a choice between this one or this one. All right. Anyway. I've been trying to quantify the proliferation of Nazism in Ukraine. I understand they are part of the National Guard, representing the government. Doesn't seem at all popular in the populace. Yeah, that doesn't matter. Nazis are rarely popular, right? Like, even Adolf Hitler, who seized power in Nazi Germany, didn't have majority support. He only had like 30% support in the populace of voting Germans. So even less than 30% of the total overall population of blah, 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 blah. It's not about what's popular, it's about power. And Nazis understand that more than anything. Right? They understand that it's about power. It's about military power. It's about having the ability to enact law and influence through power. It doesn't have anything to do with popularity. It's what you can get away with, right? And the reason why the Ukrainian government starts using the Azov battalion is because their own military was exhausted. That because of the conflicts from 2014, because of the coup, because of the loss of support amongst the populace for the post-coup government, it was difficult to get a military to actually fight on behalf of the government that was not seen as credible by huge sections of the Ukrainian population. And so, in desperation, the leadership of the illegitimate Ukrainian government reached for the Azov battalion, which was, a thuggish but well-organized militia organization who was ready to fight, right? And so they that's kind of the through line there, right? Of course, fascists, Nazis, come out of oligarchy and the maintenance of class relations when capitalism gets trouble. That's a fair thing to say, Watson. That's a fair thing to say. That, like, oligarchy can often reach for Nazism and reach for these kinds of tools, which I think I was just expressing to Tacos is more or less what happened, right? And why somebody like Donald Trump is actually quite dangerous. because he will reach for that tool, right? That the oligarchs view something like Nazism or Nazis as a tool, right? And that's why the oligarchs are dangerous, right? And we shouldn't fool ourselves on that front. But you know who's more dangerous? Nazis. Because what ends up inevitably happening, and we've seen this happen throughout recent American history, the Americans will fund far-right, like Nazi-esque, not explicitly Nazis, because culturally the Islamic fascists that were being supported throughout the Middle East weren't Nazis, obviously, because they don't have that historical blah, 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 blah. But the United States would fund these groups to overthrow a government and then install them as the government because they were compliant for a moment. And then what would happen every single time? Eventually they would start operating under their own interests, right? Start using their power for themselves, and oftentimes against the interests of the United States. And so the United States would have to come in, blow them up, clean up that mess, right? Like this, the narrative that's happening in Ukraine is not that much different from the narrative that's happening throughout Latin America, from the narratives that have happened throughout the Middle East, Africa, right? It's different now because there is Putin. Putin is the one that's making the difference in this narrative. But if Ukraine had been like Iraq was a bit bigger, but like Chile, there's a good example, right? If Ukraine had been just like Chile, where the Americans moved in, overthrew them, put in their own government, tortured a bunch of citizens, blown up the place, started stealing their resources, all that kind of stuff, it'd be the same. It's just the difference is that Vladimir Putin is on the border and was just like, nah, brah, we're not going to let that fly. I agree that Nazis are worse than oligarchs, as you say. Perspective matters. We need to have two thoughts in our head. Oligarchs are bad, Nazis are bad too, but they are worse. Nuance. It's funny too, because in my view, it's not that nuanced. Like, I don't understand. Like, we literally, like, my grandparents fought Nazis. Like, they fought Nazis. Like, our grandparents fought Nazis. Like, there's a whole, like, not, like, I could show you pictures of Superman punching a Nazi. I could show you Captain America. Indiana Jones walked around shooting Nazis. Like, Nazis. It's just not that nuanced in my mind. It really isn't. Like, just because, like, Nazis, I don't know. Communist Party of Russia supports the Russian mission to denazify Ukraine. If anyone's looking for communists supporting this, pretty sure they're not Putin supporters. Yeah. That's a really good point, Adam. Like, the communists within Russia itself are saying, like, yeah, which makes sense given what the Nazis did to communists and what Nazis do to communists, right? That, like, when Nazis take power, what do? Right? The first concentration camp that Adolf Hitler erected was a communist concentration camp. He didn't round up the Jews first. He rounded up the communists first. Right? Like, John, check out David North's video, What is Fascism? YouTube. David North. What is fascism? With Trotskyist David North. Is this the one, bud? First one? First one? Second one? Third one? Let me know. I hated that it jumps down like that. It drives me crazy. And the representation of them in the military and government as a whole seems tiny. Not a justification for resistance, just trying... No, I understand that, Tacos. Look, it doesn't matter if they're small, right? The fact that they are state-funded and that they are doing, like... Just because they are a small group doesn't mean that the damage they're doing is not large, right? And in fact, the fact that they are a small group that has seized this much power is another reason why we should be fighting against them, right? They're anti-democratic. They're ethnically cleansing Russians from the society. Like, just because they're a small faction doesn't mean they don't hold big control or big power, right? Again, worth pointing out, Adolf Hitler, right? The Nazis, they didn't have popular support. They weren't popular. They didn't win an election, right? They were appointed, and they had, you know, so small group, big power. Communist Party of Russia is not pro-Putin. They are anti-Putin, but they support denazification in Ukraine. Of course. And it makes sense that they're anti-Putin. They're trying to take power from Putin, right? It's easy for me. Nazis killed disabled people intentionally. Ballast existences, as they called us. Ooh, as you should read about in Action T4. Jeez, dude. Oh, Demand Better coming in. Didn't NATO support Putin as the most anti-communist candidate to succeed Yeltsin? They keep empowering the far right to stop communists and create fascists on both sides. Of course. Yeah, of course. Right? Like, we are very dumb. To be clear, there are fascist oligarch bourgeois backers, but not every bourgeois backer is a Nazi or a fascist. I don't know why I find that comment to be funny, dude, but it hits me. Neither Putin or NATO deserve our support. I'm gonna just slide that in there. If Putin wants to kill Nazis, I'm going to be on side with that. I think that's fine, right? Like, I don't support Putin, but if Putin wants to go in and fuck up some Nazis, especially state-funded Nazis, yeah, I'm on board with that. Yeah, I'm with the Communist Party of Russia. Russia today. Orientalism. There is no left in Germany either. Pretty much every party on the ballot is anti-China, anti-Russian intervention in Ukraine. Any former Soviet politicians from the East have become lukewarm. Isn't there a communist movements on a municipal level though, mocked? I was under the impression that it was a communist party that came to power in. It was either Frankfurt or Berlin. Wasn't there that big hullabaloo where they were trying to socialize a lot of housing, and then the court system got in their way or something like that? Like, I feel like there is a leftist communist movement that exists in Germany. It's just not federally. It's not in the federal politics, but it's more municipal. Correct me if I'm incorrect on that. Yeah, it was voted for to recognize DPR and LPR. Yeah. And that's a part of the conversation that people don't want to accept. That, like, these places, these municipalities, these, like, small provinces got together and said, yeah, independence, please. And in response to that, the Ukrainian government started fucking bombing them. Like, that's pretty intense, dude. Like, I have a pretty hard line on independence declarations. If people get together and say we declare our independence, they're right. Like, they are. In my view, there is no circumstance in which that shouldn't be the case. Like, if a group of people come together and the majority say we want to be independent, then they are. Right? And you've got to recognize it. And so Putin recognizing that that's what they did. The UN, I don't know if the UN actually acknowledged it because of the expediency of everything that was happening. Out of curiosity, what do you think is worse, a Nazi or a slaver? Ooh. They are both equally bad, but the question is, what is worse? I mean, there's a thought experiment for you. Who is bad? Who is worse? The person who is forcibly exploiting the labor of an individual, oftentimes in grueling circumstance, or the person who is just cleansing them? Well, and the reality is like Nazis are often slavers. Like they'll work people to death, right? So I would argue that it is actually the Nazi, because the Nazi, like, slavers don't necessarily also ethnically cleanse them, whereas Nazis are slavers who do ethnically cleanse. But that, now we're getting into like the real threadbare shit. And I don't want to. I don't want to spend any more time in that abstract space. Thank you very much. Yeah, Hindenburg gave Hitler the position after the coalition won. Yes, that's true. It was very much, and I'm reading this book, Rise and Fall of the Third Reich right now. William L. Schreier, big recommend, easy recommend for me. But that moment, Schreier doesn't really spend that much time on, and I don't know that it's well understood why this happens. Why does it happen that this transition of power occurs? Right? Like what happened? I'm not sure. And if somebody wants to try to give me an idea, I'm going to do other things. Nice live stream. Subscribed recently. Take care. Thanks, Stannis, bud. Good to see you. Hope to see you again, if you're still around. I'm working on art of a communist Jesus holding a taco above his head like Link from Zelda finding a new item. Amazing, dude. Amazing, dude. Please share that with me if you do that. That's amazing. I love that. Hey, Islam, how you doing? I caught a glimpse of you. Because they both want to do the same thing, have other lesson than black or juice. Like, yeah, I can't spend any more time in that abstract space. That's too much psychic damage for me. I just posted a video in the Discord, very short video. But here's the issue, as I see it, Eric, that we don't know what's going on. And there is such a thing as a color revolution, right? Like, get a whole bunch of people and get them to start chanting Russia is against the war, but like, who's backing that? Like, who's in support of that, right? Like, we genuinely don't know. And that's the issue during conflict and when the war is actually occurring. It's very difficult to know what's going on because things are happening and it's chaos. It's total chaos. And you can't really tell what's what and who's who and what is going on. So that's why I rarely, during the actual fighting, like when the war is actually happening, like I rarely attempt, it's like the inverse. Like once the war happens, it's like the inverse of what I usually do, right? Like when you're in a period of peacetime, I like watching people walking through streets and all of this because it does give you a sense of the energy and what's happening in the society. But when the conflict is happening, it's like the inverse. You can't tell what's happening. You don't know who's who. You don't know what's what. You don't know on whose side what is or anything like that. And that's true of the people who are on the ground too. Hey Drew, how you doing, bud? Good to see you. Good to see you, bud. Ugh. And so if you've got a video and there's a bunch of people shouting Russia is against the war, Russia is against the war, well, who are these people? Who's funding them? Who's backing them? Where did they come from? We simply don't know, right? And color revolution is a tactic that is constantly used, right? And so we've got to be immediately suspicious because we just have to be, and that's just the unfortunate truth. And don't get me wrong, I'm sure that there are Russians and Ukrainians who are against what's happening. I'm sure of it. Absolutely dead positive, right? So where does saying both sides are bad get us on Putin versus NATO? Ukraine is targeting civilians, and Donetsk is 2016. Donetsk requested this. Honestly, dude, the both sides are bad argument is more and more looking just kind of like thoughts and prayers to me, right? It's just a way for leftists just to be like, both sides are bad. Both sides are bad. Both sides are bad. Yep. Thoughts and prayers. Both sides are bad. That's it. That's really, it's got that flavor to it, right? Like both sides are bad. Thoughts and prayers. Gonna go move on with my life. That's kind of what it is. But that's not the job, right? That's not the job. That's the unfortunate truth of my position in this, right? Like if all I did was sat here and said both sides are bad, well then what's my job? What am I doing here? I'm not here to just say both sides are bad. I'm here to take a position and defend that position, right? And I don't think people would even watch me if all I was doing is walk around being like both sides are bad. Or go to mainstream media for that shit. First one, you got it, bud.
What?
I'm gonna catch up with the chat, and then I'm gonna go play this and go use the bathroom. Okay, bud? It's only 8 minutes long, so I think watching this is reasonable. They are training militants from other countries, including. Was that not a continuation? Alicia Velt, good evening, Islam. Yes, to you as well. Everyone should have the right to self-determination. That's true. That's true. Everyone should have the right to self-determination. You supported Chechnya independence? Honestly, Ryan, I don't think I know enough about that situation to comment on it. And because you seem very passionate on this specific Chechnya. Not maybe not today. I'm gonna read up more on this. I don't know enough to be able to speak on it. So I'm gonna save that for later. You come back on Monday, bud, and we'll talk about it, okay? But I do. If the Chechnyans stood up and said we are an independent nation, and Putin rolled in and said no, you're fucking not, I definitely have a problem with that, for sure. Which that doesn't contradict anything I've said about Putin. Putin is a petty king. I don't know how often I need to say it. Putin's a petty king. They were trying to do that in Berlin, but 20% is SPT, 36% Greens, 14 Democratic Socialists, 8 AFD. Yeah. Both sides are dehumanizing for the sake of power. Oh yeah, we're getting into that argument. Reijo Sato. I feel like you've been around before, bud. Have you been around before? In any case, good to see you, bud. Good to see you. John, have you heard about China and their artificial sun? I have, dude. What a crazy story, eh? Like, we're falling behind China, dude. We're gonna fall behind China in ways that I don't think people really get. Like, China is gonna have access to power sources that are gonna be absurd, and we're just gonna be like, what are we doing? We're just here wanking. Like, the Texan power grid is failing. China's, like, turning on a goddamn sun. Like, unbelievable. I wouldn't agree with the majority declaring independence without checking treaty rights first. Now you're getting into the more specifics of it, Adam, whereas I'm living in kind of a larger, broader space. Yeah, like, if it's largely understood, if there's like an agreement between treaties and things like this, and there's like a legal kind of thing, yeah, you do need to proceed in a way that makes sense. But you still need to acknowledge the truth that the majority consensus within the body itself is declaring its independence. So it at least evokes the treaty, right? Like that if you want to get into treaty rights and all that, right? Like it at least evokes the treaty. You at least need to open it up and look at it, right? Whereas I think what Ryan is probably talking about, and I suspect is actually true, is that the Chechnyans, and again, I don't know much about that situation. Okay, I'm not an expert on this, so I'm gonna read up on it to know more. But I suspect what we'll see is that the Chechnyans declared their independence, and Putin, instead of opening up the treaty rights and beginning the proceedings of acknowledging that independence or negotiating, just moved troops in. That's what I expect to see, and so like you're just sort of making more specific what I have made general, which is to say that somebody declares independence. Okay, that opens up our treaty. We should have a negotiation. Maybe I can convince you not to be independent, right? Maybe we can redraw a treaty or create a new agreement or any of that kind of stuff, right? But if a nation declares its independence, you have to acknowledge it. And part of that acknowledgement is to move forward in treaty rights. Okay, I'm spending way too much time on that. 30 million dead to the Nazis in Russia. They have a vested interest in stopping them. It's totally understandable. Dude, yeah, Islam. Thank you, goddamn. Islam, my heart is with you. My heart is with you. Every single time you say something in chat, I just feel like it's like my heart in front of my eyes. It's just like a Care Bear stare. Dude. I did the most annoying thing in the video today. I said 200 million Russians killed by Nazis when I meant 20 million. I think people know. I think people know. Nobody's come around on me and tried to go after me for that error. And I put a correction like at the bottom of the video, like in the description. But I think it's people got to know. I said 200 million. I bet you everybody, if either they didn't notice or if they did notice, they were like, he means 20. But I'm still pissed off by it. I'm still annoyed by it. And like, I only discovered it after I already shared it on all the social media and everything. And I was like, oh, no, I'm not going to like take the video down, put in like a little disclaimer in the video and then upload it and then do it all again. Fuck that. Anyway. A lot of them are Ukrainians who left their country to avoid a draft. USA arrested lots of anti-war protesters. It's funny seeing the press act like Russia is unique on this. Yeah. I mean, especially amidst an actual war, right? Like, both sides are back is giving real fishhook theory. Yeah. Agreed. Just a random agreed. You know what, bud? If you're agreeing with me, you're right. Thanks, bud. War is shit. Mainstream media doing enough. Yeah. Have you heard of Mark Blythe? Absolutely, Mark Blythe. Mark Blythe is one of the... Mark Blythe is one of those economists who, anytime anybody asks me, hey, who should I pay attention to? What source should I pay attention to? And all this kind of stuff. I say like Richard Wolff. I say people like Michael Hudson, and then I forget completely about Mark Blythe. Mark Blythe is an absolute must watch. He isn't like anti-American. Like, he doesn't go after like America. He doesn't go after things. He just kind of talks about how he sees things in a more kind of abstract, objective space. But he's right. Like, that's the thing about Mark Blythe, is that he's right. And so, like, it's interesting because he's like an economist who is commenting on the economics of the day while being somewhat apolitical, if you understand me. Like, he's not completely apolitical, obviously. I don't think you can be. But he doesn't really bring forward political positions or opinions that often. But the fact that he is right means that you got to listen to him. Like, you do. And also he is. It's funny and accessible, and he's an excellent storyteller. Excellent storyteller. Yeah, and I think your comment here, generally anti-capitalist, speaks kind of to the way he presents himself as an apolitical... Like, the only reason he's anti-capitalist is because he's anti-austerity, right? He's anti-austerity and he's anti, like, neoliberal economics, because, but he's anti those things, and his position is because they don't work, right? Like, that's his position. Like, he's not anti-capitalist so much as he is just like, yeah, neoliberalism doesn't work, austerity doesn't work, here's the reasons why. And so he doesn't take it to the degree that I take it, where it's like a very much political thing. He keeps it within this realm of economics. But he's right. And that makes him powerful. Sorry, I turned away mid-thought. Yeah, dude, I've been there, Dave, for sure. Here's an interesting tidbit about Action T4 that I never see mentioned. Oh, okay. You want me to search this, bud? Oh, okay. Let me... Okay, we're going to do this, and then I'm going to play this video, because I got to use the bathroom. Aloysia Veit, okay, this is a person, was a great cousin of Adolf Hitler and a victim of Nazi murders. She came from the Schicklgruber line. How's that for a name? Her paternal great-grandmother, Josephia Schicklgruber, and Adolf Hitler's paternal grandmother, Marie Anna Schicklgruber, were sisters. She was employed as a maid. Because of abnormal behavior, she was admitted to the asylum in Vienna in January 26, 1932, where she spent 9 years in closed wards. According to her patient record, she suffered from schizophrenic mental disorders, perplexity and depression, confusion, hallucinations, and delusions. On November 28, 1940, she was transported to the Viennese Municipal Sanatorium and Nursing Home, and from there to the Nazi killing center, where she was murdered in the gas chamber. So they literally just took her, like his own cousin. Like his own fucking cousin. Not like direct cousin, but like... Schicklgruber. Can you imagine? Adolf Schicklgruber? The great and powerful Nazi regime of the Schicklgrubers. The Schicklgrubers. The name resounds throughout history, right? The Great Terrors, right? Eric the Red, Alexander the Great, Genghis Khan, Vlad the Impaler, Adolf Schicklgruber. Yes, that's accurate, Mock, for sure. For sure. Oh, Schicklgruber. A name that just strikes fear in the hearts of all who hear it. Schicklgruber. Yes. What a fucking ridiculous story, dude. Like, this is fucking vicious. This is vicious. Like, a woman who was hurting no one, who was obviously tormented. Just round her up. Gas chambers. Nazis, bro. Nazis. Okay. I'm going to run off. I can still hear this, so I'm not missing anything. This is only 8 minutes. Watson has highly recommended this, so let's go. And just so you know, guys, if it's under 10 minutes, it's more likely that I'll actually play it on the stream, okay?
What is now beginning to take place throughout the world after so many decades in which the class struggle was suppressed, there is a growing movement throughout the world of the working class against conditions that exist. The ruling elites see this. They know where this is going. They feel the threat. And their response to this threat is to move further and further to the right, to begin preparing for massive confrontations, and that is why they begin to encourage the growth of fascistic movements. And I'm going to conclude with a brief explanation of what we mean when we talk about fascism. What is fascism? Well, you can use it, and to some extent with justification, given the experience of the 20th century, as a word which denotes horrifying forms of dictatorship, mass violence against people, killings and torture, and that's entirely correct. You can speak of fascistic personalities, leaders who have a fascistic character, and Trump certainly corresponds to that. But a certain clarification must be made here, because an important theoretical and political issue is involved. The socialist movement began discussing fascism in the 1920s, in the aftermath of the Russian Revolution and the formation of the Communist International. And certainly the response of the ruling class internationally to the Russian Revolution, the first great overthrow of capitalism, was violence. The organization of military squads, extra-parliamentary groups to attack the working class. A certain new type of phenomena came into existence, which was initially personified by an Italian politician by the name of Mussolini. And what was distinct about Mussolini, an ex-socialist, an ex-syndicalist, was that he had the idea that he could organize paramilitary squads, recruit among elements within the middle class, utilize their hatred of the workers, and direct them against the working class. And he came to power in 1922. There was a period of political struggle, but by 1925 he had consolidated a dictatorship which had a certain amount of mass support based in elements within the middle class which were directed against the working class. In other words, it was a form of dictatorship which didn't just rely on the military, the police, but sought to create a broader social basis for the destruction of working class resistance. Mussolini inspired Hitler. And Hitler took this concept and expanded it and was able to build, especially in the aftermath of the Depression, which broke out in 1929, and the growth of mass unemployment, and the desperation of ever broader sections of the lower middle class, a mass movement, stormtroopers, military squads, for violent attack on the working class organizations. And this was the specific character of a fascist movement. You might say historically there have been such movements in the United States. Certainly the Ku Klux Klan was such a movement. The organization of a middle class, lower middle class rabble against the working class, particularly the African American working class, to smash their resistance to oppression. Now, Trotsky explained at the time that the only way a fascist movement could be defeated was through the mobilization of the working class, and he made another point, that fascist movements can never really come to power until that point when the working class is demoralized, where it is unable to find a path to power. And then elements of the middle class and the population who are wavering between these two forces lose confidence in the possibility of socialism and turn to the right. Now, I want to make this critical point. The next stage of development among the masses of workers in the United States, and including broad sections of the middle class, will not be to the right, it will be to the left. We live in a country where wealth is concentrated in a very small section of the population, really the top 10%. Below that level, life gets harder and harder and more impossible. The bottom 50% have nothing. Those between 50 and 90% are in various levels of acute struggle, trying to make ends meet. That's the almost universal American experience. And that's a broad social basis for the growth of a socialist movement. But the challenge is to provide that great mass of the working population with a political program, with a perspective. And for that, you require the development of a conscious revolutionary movement, a conscious political party. If that is done, if the objective conditions are acted upon, not only can fascism be defeated, but we can establish a socialist society. That is our perspective, and history proves that is correct. Fascism doesn't just waltz into power. It's a punishment, to be blunt, for the failure of the working class to create that leadership. So I'm going to conclude now on the following point. Because everyone here has to make some decisions. We can make speeches, we can explain as best we can, but if you think we're correct, and you see the dangers, and you recognize on an objective basis the possibilities, then you have to decide what you're going to do. And I hope that what you're going to decide to do is decide to build a revolutionary movement, turn to the working class, unify the great, powerful force which exists within the society. Black and white, Hispanic, straight, gay, that's not the central distinction in the society. The main distinction in this society is a class distinction. Those who control wealth in staggering levels of billions, which are wasted on these people, while hundreds of thousands and millions in this country go hungry or lack education. People have to struggle, are deprived of the most basic rudiments of culture, and are threatened with catastrophes such as war, climactic disruptions. You've got to decide what you're going to do. You've got to make the decision to fight, and if you make that decision, then you should join our party and help us build this revolutionary movement within the United States and internationally. Thank you very much.
Fuck yeah. And you can see the threat that what he's talking about manifesting in North American politics. That the Democratic Party is not a legitimate working class party. It exists to diffuse working class energy. And that's dangerous because it has the effect of killing socialist organization and legitimate socialist. It ends the journey of the working class to be able to seize power. You see it in the United States. Figures like Bernie Sanders, figures like AOC exist to funnel energy into this dead-end graveyard of a party. And America, because they don't have the ability to influence politics and create any kind of socialist movement whatsoever, like social democratic anything, eventually they will turn to the right. And figures like Donald Trump, John Bolton, like these ghoulish figures will begin to take power and influence the public in very much the same way. And in my view, like what truly offends me about what's going on in American politics specifically is that people are acting as though the Democrats like have any kind of moral authority or moral ground when it's the Democrats that are working the hardest. Like, the Republicans are against socialist and communist movements on the face of it, right? They are against it. But the Democrats pretend like they're not when they are. Like, that's what's truly dangerous. Did I hear Sanders on Ukraine? Yeah, I'm probably disappointing, right? Like, probably the same line. Let's take a look. And thanks for that, Watson. Thanks for sharing that. That was a really good video, bud. Real powerful stuff. Real powerful stuff. Also gives me a moment to, I don't know, we just need to be talking, right? As much as I love it. Bernie Sanders, Ukraine. Oh, yeah. Same shit. Same shit, right? That's the Supreme Court. In an authoritarian country like Russia, protest is an act of enormous courage. I stand against the Ukrainian people against this war. Yeah, like, just toeing the line, right? Well, and also, like, the reality, like, Sanders is an important cultural figure, and much how Obama is an important cultural figure. But the truth is if he understood history at all, he would never stand in front of people and say, "Oh no, I'm not for the socialism of the Soviet Union or any of that. I'm for the social democracy of Finland or Norway or any of this." Well, those social democracies can only exist with the threat of revolution, right? That's how those social democracies come to exist in the first place, because social democracy is a concession by the capitalist class against to the workers, right? It's the last resort by the capitalist class. And they're not going to do it unless there's a legitimate threat of revolution, right? And so Bernie Sanders standing up and being like, Bernie Sanders standing up and being like, "No, I'm for the social democracy." Well, it's extremely ahistorical. It's completely disconnected from what's real. And this idea, like, you're never going to vote in social democracy. It's never going to happen. It's always a concession by the capitalists against something more existentially threatening to them, which is a fucking revolution. I love that Lenin quote. It's straight dopamine. Isn't it, though, Islam? Oh, I love it. There are decades where we fuck around and weeks where we find out. I love it. I love it. Yeah, FDR is a prime example. Exactly. Like FDR, on behalf of the capitalist class, had to concede everything. They conceded lots, like a ton. They didn't concede the means of production, which was the mistake of the communists and the socialists in the end. That they didn't kill the beast when they had the chance. That they took the concessions. And we see, and we're paying for it today, right? We're paying for it today in very serious ways, literally on an existential level, where the beast is attempting to kill us. You know what I haven't done? We didn't do the number draw. Let's do the number draw. Oh, guys, before I do this,
here we go.
You know what's? Oops. You know what's made this all worth it? New subscriber, Chad Thundercock. Welcome aboard, Chad. Welcome aboard. It's made it all worth it. All right, I'm in for a 10. I'm going big.
Here we go for today's number. It's February 25, 2022.
We got a 4. We got a
10
good
balls.
spread. Did we hit all of it?
Each ball
1,
has
2,
a
3,
number.
4, 5, 6, 7. So we got a
Numbers
70%
1 through
chance.
10.
We got a 70% chance of hitting the number.
Whirl the number.
Coming in with an 8. Doubling down, Watson. Doubling down. Watch, it's going to be the 8 now. That's usually how it goes on this
Pick
channel.
a number.
Pick a number. Here we go. Here we go. Here we go. Get hype. Get hype.
Today's number is 2.
Oddity. Break it down. What? Yeah. May the energy of David Lynch carry you through these dark and troubled times. Oh man, I could use some of that David Lynch energy. I tell you what. The newest season of Twin Peaks. I knew it was going to be weird, but man, David Lynch, he made it weird. It was weird, dude. And I loved it though. I couldn't stop watching it. I was just like, this is fucking weird. I know, F off with your rigged bingo. I know, right, Watson? It's completely rigged. Totally. Me and David Lynch, we've got an agreement. We've got an agreement. All right, let me... this is just nothing. Yeah, this is nothing. There's memes and shit. This should interest you all. Russia just threatened military consequences against Finland and Sweden if they think of joining NATO. Yeah, things are fucking real over there, man. Things are fucking real over there. Kenny condemned for promoting oil interests during Russia invasion of Ukraine. I mean, are we fucking surprised? Like, what a total shitbag this guy is. Right? Like, what's come on. Here we go. As the world responded in shock to the Russian invasion, some politicians and media outlets in Canada saw the latest violence as an opportunity to promote this country's fossil fuel interests. On Wednesday evening, Alberta Premier Jason Kenney called for a hard global embargo of all Russian oil and gas exports. On Thursday, Kenney tweeted, "The choice is clear. Alberta oil is better than dictator oil," referring to Russia's oil sector. Alberta Energy Minister Sonia Savage, brilliant name by the way, Sonia Savage, dude, can you just see the picture of like Sonia Savage just like sitting there with like an assault rifle like looking at you like 80s style Sonia Savage? Dude, we gotta find out what Sonia Savage looks like. Are you kidding me? Alberta Minister Sonia Savage. She better look fucking amazing. This better be the best. Dude, it's better than I thought it was gonna be. Dude, look at this person. Look at this person. Sonia Savage. Yes. Yes. It's exactly what I wanted. It's exactly what I want. I thought in my mind's eye she was definitely blonde. And she had like the headband, you know, like Mortal Kombat 1 Sonya Blade, right? Like the headband, right? But you can really see it, eh? You can see it. She's got like the assault rifle, right? She's looking here, being like, we are not going to take Russian oil. I love it. I love it. I am in love with her. Oh, yeah, Ghislaine vibe, for sure. For sure. It's the hair that's doing it, dude. Like, look how enormous this hair is. Okay. That's enough of Sonia Savage. Kick-ass name. Why do the right-wingers have the most kick-ass name? You got, like, Faith Goldie, right? Like, that's a badass name. Sonia Savage. Jesus Christ. That's why I'll never become, like, a leader in Canada, right? I'll never be a political anything. My name is John Sanderson. Like, my name might as well be Potato. Would you like the most average sounding shit in your life? John Sanderson. If I ran for politics, I'd probably go by Jonathan Sanderson, just to make people say the most amount that they have to. Jonathan Sanderson. All right. Alberta Minister Sonia Savage took the conflict as an opportunity to criticize U.S. President Joe Biden's decision to cancel the Keystone XL pipeline project, which would have transported oil from Alberta to Nebraska. 1 year after Biden vetoed KXL, U.S. demand for oil has increased, Savage tweeted. They're still importing Russian oil. Like, that's what's so funny about this whole crisis, right? It's like, the U.S. can't really do anything about it. Like, that's the big thing, right? Like what's the U.S. actually supposed to do? Like, they're responding with sanctions, but those sanctions are so weak, and they're on, like, very specific people, right? But the reality is, like, Russia is providing energy to even the United States. Like, what's the United States supposed to do? Like, they can't invade. They can't actually get into direct conflict with Moscow. They can't do any of this. Like, if Russia wanted to fuck with Europe in a way that it would feel the pinch, they literally could just pull a switch, right? Just stop the flow of energy through the pipelines. Like, that would be the end of it. Like, but they're not going to do that either, because now you're talking about a real escalation, right? Like, that's going to put a pinch on the citizens and escalate things in a very dramatic way. So Putin doesn't necessarily want to do that either, right? Like, this geopolitical situation is so fucking, like, everybody's in bed with everybody else, and everything is so intertwined and interwoven that it's absurd that war exists at all. Like, that's the part of it that just kills me the most. Like, I genuinely think we've gotten to a point technologically and as a people where it's probably actually cheaper to just build grids that interconnect everything and be nice about it than it is to, like, go to war and shit. But, you know, we're fucking monkeys. We're fucking monkeys. Richard Wolff came out and said these sanctions are pointless because the only people that hurts is always the working class and increase inflation. Yeah, exactly. And also, from what I'm seeing, is, like, the sanctions are very specific. They're very targeted, right? They're not going to, like, they're not gonna, like this idea right here, where they're talking about, like, we need to shut off oil from Russia. Like, that's not going to happen. It's just not gonna happen. And if it did, I would be sitting here being like, oh my God, we are this dumb. Like, I make wrong calls all the time. For example, I didn't think the United States was actually going to allow for Russia to actually invade Ukraine. Like, I really didn't. I thought that the United States would resolve this diplomatically, right? I thought that they would be like, okay, we'll resolve this diplomatically. You don't need to invade or any of this kind of stuff. But they didn't. And so Putin invaded. I'm like... And so what did somebody do? Someone clipped. I said on a TikTok, if you think Putin is going to invade, you might be living in a fantasy land. That's the quote. And so someone clipped that and then shared that around, that clip of me. And I talked to him, and he was doing it just as like, haha, which is how I took it. Like, it's fine. You can't predict the future. But And it's like, oh yeah, okay, people are spreading my shit around. It was actually kind of a fun little moment. I'm just like, oh shit. Get dunked, John. Get fucking dunked. Isn't that what's crazy about this, man? Like, for real. If the Americans wanted this situation to not exist, it wouldn't exist. And it would really actually be as simple as just backing off. Like, that's it. And they knew that Russia was building up to do this. They've been calling it, right? For months, they've been calling it. Well, like, why would you not simply avoid it? Why require that they do it? Why make them do it? And the only reason that they make them do it is so that they can ramp up Cold War rhetoric, right? Make sure their own people are anti-Russian, right? Well, it's not surprising that nothing is happening, considering that during World War II, the capitalists still funded Nazi Germany, sold goods, services to them. Yeah, exactly. No, the relationship between America and Germany is pretty tight. Like, I'm more or less of the opinion that the only reason why the Americans involve themselves in that conflict is because the Soviets defeated the Nazis. That the Soviets were pushing the Nazis back out of their territory. They had broken the back of the Nazi regime. The Nazis were losing ground. There was, and they knew they couldn't recover, right? They knew they couldn't just. There was no second wave coming, right? And the Nazis knew it. They were signaling their defeat. They understood, right? That's what was happening, and that's when the Americans go in, right? And so the Americans are going in for a very opportunistic reason. And the reason is as simple as, well, the Soviets can't take Europe, right? Because they would have, right? The Soviets just would have swept across Europe. And so what did they do? Oops. Oh, I didn't want to shut that down. So I'm going to get it back. This picture is too funny. I need to keep this picture around. So they came in Normandy, right? Normandy's right here, right? I'm not crazy. Oh, shit. I suck. I'm the worst. Right, so they come in here, push into Paris, right? And they meet in Berlin, right? That's where your whole Berlin Wall situation happens. There's more or less the divide that occurs, right? This is like the former Soviet bloc, right? And then, of course, the post-Soviet kind of stuff, all this stuff. But the only reason they push in and do this is so that the Soviets won't take all of Germany, all of France, all of Spain, because the concern, obviously, is that once the Soviets have it, they're not going to give it back, right? They're not going to relinquish control, and so that this whole area becomes the Soviet Union, right? And so the Americans go in very opportunistically, right? Yeah, we gotta fight those Nazis who have already lost the war, but we gotta go in and fight them. Yeah, a slap on the wrist for Nazis, a spike back for communists. Exactly. Exactly, dude. But up until that moment, when the Nazis start to lose the war against the Soviets, the Americans were fucking funding this shit. They were funneling money into this shit. Who do you think some of these industrialists were that were funding Adolf Hitler, right? Like, it's the idea that America was anti-Nazi, right? I mean, for God's sakes, Adolf Hitler was Times Man of the Year twice in a row. Like, that corporations were selling goods in Germany. The IBM machines, the machines that were used for the Holocaust were created by IBM. Stalin didn't even want to build a Berlin Wall. He proposed to unify Germany. The reason why the Berlin Wall was built was because the West was offering wages the East couldn't afford, causing brain drain as all the technicians and scientists went to the West. Along with the constant terror attacks, yeah, supported by the West German government, yeah. Messy period, dude. Messy period. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down that wall. That'd be a really cool moment to live through, I gotta tell you. Like, being in Germany when that wall was getting torn down. And it's And it really is a case of just like the citizens themselves finally were just like, get rid of this fucking thing. Get this shit out of here. Right? Direct action, inaction. Keep in mind that in the US, the response of FDR reform, they tried to do a fascist coup. Yeah. Yep. Like, there's always the threat of that, man. They're always trying that shit. They're always angling that shit. It'll be wild, man, if we live through that moment. I've been saying it a lot on this channel. I suspect we're gonna live through that. I suspect there's gonna be a moment where the United States is completely ruled just openly by some kind of thing. Like the rule does seem to be how you act on the world stage is eventually what happens at home, right? That's like an ancient Greek kind of idea that Athens. Good old Athens, right? The Athenians said this, that they were like, if you war abroad and you act that way, well, eventually it'll come home. And that's how your rulers will act in Athens. And that's exactly what happened, right? That's exactly what happened. And the even Caligula wasn't this bad. I mean, I do think a good deal of it has to do with like so much of what occurs in the abstract now. Like, we are, like, the people in fucking Washington aren't in Chile, right? They're not there. So they can just, like, send out this decree. And then it's enacted by, like, some guy here who never meets the person who wrote the decree, right? So there's, like, a facelessness to it, you know? There's like this, like... And that's what makes it so unsettling and sinister. And insidious, right? Like, that's the nature of the evil that exists in the world today, is that it's so that it's this sinister insidiousness. Whereas like the evils of the past were more just simply barbaric, right? Like, I'm going to stab you with a sword. I'm going to impale you on this rod. I'm going to go in and like the violence was very up close and personal. And unapologetic. There was a real like, yeah, I own this army. We fucked you up. What are you gonna do about it, bro? Like, there was this real like element of that, and the response from humanity to deal with it and to cope, I think, was just like a kind of begrudging respect. You know, that like, oh yeah, he leads the biggest army that beats everybody up. Yeah, okay. Yep, you gotta respect it. Gotta respect it, right? And whereas now it's like our leadership pretends, it's got like this smiling face on it. Like, it's got this smiling nicey nice, and there's all this manufactured consent and all this kind of stuff that and like the media apparatus and all of the energy that gets put into the deception campaigns and all of this kind of crazy shit that goes on, where we can be convinced to believe that like someone like Obama, for example, is actually on our side. He's coming in, yeah, hope and change, all that kind of stuff, but like at the end he's just as barbarous as the rest of these guys. And so there's like this sinister quality, this insidious quality to today's world that I don't think existed as much in the past. Although Victorian England kind of had that kind of quality, right? Queen Victoria really loved like all the pomp and the circumstance and the glitter and the gold, but did some pretty fucking brutal shit. I think about that all the time. Like, just how crazy it was not that long ago. Like, just how fucking crazy this idea. Like, the people who emigrated, my family, emigrating from Ireland, like, get on a wooden boat, traverse the ocean to get to Canada. Like, being on a fucking wooden boat. Tuning in late, have you done Swift yet? I haven't, Ward. How you doing, bud? Good to see you. Always good to see you, Ward. I don't know what angle to take with this Swift story. The Swift banking system. Like, there's calls to, yeah, Trudeau announces sanctions on Putin, calls for Russia's removal from Swift. It's an interesting talking point, but if they did it, it'd be like the biggest shot in the foot ever, right? That like all that's going to do is chase Russia into the hands of China. That's all, right? If they removed Russia from the SWIFT banking system, if they pry him out of the political apparatus and all that kind of stuff, then that just means he's going to turn to China more, right? Like that's my take. So it's stupid to do it. Like it's stupid to call for it, right? Like, oh, we'll just essentially it's Justin Trudeau throwing his floofy hair and saying we should give him the silent treatment. Like that's a bad idea. That's a bad idea, dude. Like the American dollar is starting to look more and more fragile by the day. America is swimming in debt. The banking system itself has already experienced a major collapse in 2008. It can easily experience a similar collapse. So you're telling me you're just going to incentivize Putin to just run off to China? But I mean, since when have the Americans or NATO shown that they're smart, right? Like these guys are dopey dumbasses. Like, and that's part of it. Like, they don't know what to do about Russia, right? Like, they've been operating for 60 years. 60 years? About. So, let's say 50 years. Like, North America has been operating for 50 years under the idea that what we say goes. That we're the big bullies on the stage and we can push people around and what we say goes. And now there's forces in the world, Russia, China, where they're like, well, this is what we want. And like the Russians or the Chinese stand up and say, nah, that's okay, bro. Not in our interests. Right? And it's like the West is just like, and like now you have a situation in Ukraine where Russia has made it explicit now. Like it's explicit now. Like Russia's not going to listen to what the United States has to say. And they're willing to go to bat. They're willing to drop bombs and shit over it, right? They're willing to go to bat over it. Like, this is something that I don't think is actually that well understood in the populace yet, because the populace is just kind of acting from a gut reaction sort of thing. This moment does actually herald in a new era, right? It's a power shift, certainly. Like, Russia just asserted itself militarily against NATO and the United States' interests and has explicitly stated through proof that it's not going to go along with this game, right? It's not simply going to be the sleeping bear. And if they try to get Russia out of all this banking shit and all that kind of stuff, okay, Russia's just going to go to China. Human rights aside, yet China is taking its place. Yeah, I mean, that, because at the end of the day, like, who looks more stable right now, guys? Like, really? Like, let's compare and contrast. Who's looking more stable at the moment? Is it the United States and Europe, or is it China? Which of these two is looking more stable? Right? The United States does not look stable. Like, its political sphere is insane. Like, what is happening within the halls of power is nuts. Like, just crazy nuts. Like, crazy go nuts. Like, we're talking about, like, Nero with the fiddle while Rome burns crazy. Like, for real, like, you really gotta reach. Like, we're talking like Marcus Aurelius and Cleopatra committing suicide level crazy. Like this, you really gotta reach to like enormous Shakespearean epic scale stories to capture a similar type of insanity throughout human history. Like, what is happening in the United States is insane on a scale that even someone like Shakespeare, I think, would not know how to capture. Like, one side of the conversation is literally just greedy oligarchs who have taken over like techno people like Google, Facebook, Musk, Bezos. These are the Democrats. And then the other side of the conversation are like nut job evangelicals and people who are just saying, yeah, the solution to the problem is to nuke them. That's the solution. Like, it... And who's their leader? A game show host. Like... What? What? Like, it's an absurdist drama on a scale that humanity has just not seen before. And so, yeah, the world is going to turn to China. And the world is going to turn to China. Real simple, like, South America certainly is. Why? Because they don't want to get fucking fucked up by the United States anymore. Africa certainly is. Why? Because they don't want to get fucked up by the United States anymore. Right? The Middle East is going to. Why? Because they don't want to get fucked up by the United States anymore. Right? Russia's going to. Why? Because they don't want to get fucked up by the United States anymore. So the only place left is Europe. And Europe probably will. Why? Because they don't want to get fucked up by the United States anymore. Yeah, we are in the bad place, Islam. Yep. And it very much is like season 1 of The Bad Place. Or of The Good Place, rather. If you've never seen this, spoilers. Yeah, season 1. I saw season 1. And spoiler alert, spoiler alert. Spoiler alert, if you don't want to be spoiled for season 1 of The Good Place, close your ears for a second. Like, it is like that, where we think we're in the good place, and then very steadily we've come to realize that, oh, this is actually the bad place. That we have just been living in something of a simulation, which I think, Major, you're kind of hitting on, right? It's a simulation that's glitching out, yeah. Like, here's the harsh reality. We are monkeys. That's it. Like, we are monkeys. We're monkeys that have the ability to enter an abstract space. And the prevailing ideology for a long time now in the United States is that this ability for us to collectively enter an abstract space should not be used. That we should instead replace this unique ability we have to enter an abstract space collectively with one another with something called the free market. And the free market will decide what happens. Not the abstract space that we all collectively create as a skill set built in to our like DNA, but rather this abstract concept that lies outside of that. Like, that's what the problem is, by the way, if you ask me. That, like, if you were to ask me, like, John, what do you think is, like, the linchpin issue? What do you think is the, like, the thing that has led to all of our problems? I would say we have a built-in evolutionary skill that separates us from all other creatures to the degree that we're aware of it. And that is, we have the ability to enter an abstract space with one another, create and plan within that abstract space, and then take from the abstract space and manifest into the real world that which was previously exclusively abstract. And we're not using it. Should look up the 2 monkey grape experiment. You got it, Islam. Let's go. Let's go. Two monkey grape experiment. Oh, I know this. I know what this is. Yeah.
So a final experiment that I want to mention to you is our fairness study. And so this became a very famous study, and there's now many more, because after we did this about 10 years ago, it became very well known. And we did that originally with capuchin monkeys, and I'm going to show you the first experiment that we did. It has now been done with dogs, and with birds, and with chimpanzees. But with Sarah Brosnan, we started out with capuchin monkeys. So what we did is we put two capuchin monkeys side by side. Again, these animals, they live in a group. They know each other. We take them out of the group, put them in a test chamber. And there's a very simple task that they need to do. And if you give both of them cucumber for the task, the two monkeys side by side, they're perfectly willing to do this 25 times in a row. So cucumber, even though it's really only water in my opinion, but cucumber is perfectly fine for them. Now, if you give the partner grapes, the food preferences of my capuchin monkeys correspond exactly with the prices in the supermarket. And so if you give them grapes, that's a far better food, then you create inequity between them. So that's the experiment we did. Recently, we videotaped it with new monkeys who had never done the task, thinking that maybe they would have a stronger reaction, and that turned out to be right. The one on the left is the monkey who gets cucumber. The one on the right is the one who gets grapes. The one who gets cucumber, note that the first piece of cucumber is perfectly fine. The first piece she eats. Then she sees the other one getting grape, and you will see what happens. So she gives a rock to us, that's the task. And we give her a piece of cucumber, and she eats it. The other one needs to give a rock to us. And that's what she does. And she gets a grape. And she eats it. The other one sees that. She gives a rock to us now, gets again cucumber.
It's like looking in a mirror. I really do see.
She tests the rock now against the wall. She needs to give it to us. And she gets cucumber again.
Right?
So this is basically the Wall Street protest that you see here.
Yep. And if you keep that experiment up, eventually the monkey will stop giving you the rock. Because it's not worth doing anymore for them. Right? Like, I remember seeing this, right? I remember seeing this. This went around during the Occupy movement. I remember that. I want the grape! Give me the grape! Incidentally, exactly how I act. But exactly how everybody acts, right? Like, everyone is willing to accept that, like, oh, you know what? I did that work and I got that, and they did that work and they got that. Like, this essentially explains, like, nations in poverty, right? Like, if you're a nation that is in poverty and everybody is sort of dealing with it and everybody's putting in the same effort and getting the same kind of stuff, then there's a general sort of happiness that occurs because everybody's just like, yeah, this is life, right? And we're doing our best, and everybody's doing together ape strong, all that kind of stuff. And then simultaneously, then also if you have a wealthier society, but it's equal, like everybody's doing the same kind of, again, there's like a happiness and everybody's kind of fine with it. It's this imbalance that happens. It's this imbalance that occurs, right? That if I do this work and I get nothing for it, and you do less work and get everything for it, well, that's going to lead to a very imbalanced, unhappy society, which is exactly where we're at. Oh yeah, the slapping on the railing against the plastic screen is so damn human nature. You toss your poop at people you dislike? Yes. No. No. Although I'm picturing myself throwing some poop at a Nazi. Yeah, fuck those Nazis. I think the reason why I wouldn't is because then I gotta hold my own poop. Nah. It's not worth it for me. Right? Like, I have to hold my own poop and then throw it at them. And it's gonna, like, hit them, maybe? Like, and maybe it's gonna hit them. right? Probably isn't going to hit them because I'm not that good a throw. I used to be when I was a kid. I was a second baseman when I was a kid. And it's going to hit him and then fall. And like, honestly, like, even if it's sticky and it's like kind of stuck on them and then it falls, like, it's going to get on them a little bit, but then I'm going to have poop like on my hand, like my hand. And I'm like, it's just not worth it. It's just, none of it is worth it to me, right? There's not, at no point do I look at that and go like, yeah, I won, you know? Like, then I got to go like wash and sanitize my hands and like, yeah, it's my own poop, but what if you trebucheted your poop at them? Now we're talking, Watson. Now we're entering the abstract space, and we're creating a theoretical thing. So I could like poop into a bucket, and then take the poop and put it in the trebuchet and trebuchet it at them. And then like the worst thing that I have to do is kind of clean those things, which I can put gloves on and all that. So they get the poop on them, and I don't get any poop on me. Now we're fucking talking. Here's the high quality content that you guys tune into. Here's the clip. Let's clip that. Spread that around. Come to my YouTube. We talk about poop. Throwing a cucumber should be a symbol of revolution. Exactly. Oh. Let's hope our dolphin overlords will save us from ourselves. Oh, bro. Can't be worse than this. Can't be worse than this. I just wish that we were talking to animals more, right? Like, we know we can. Like, we know we can. We just don't, you know? Put it somewhere they are around a lot, won't expect it. They get pop shot at them with high velocity. Like find a Nazi bar, and just find a Nazi bar, rent out the space across from the Nazi bar, and then just like trebuchet them as they come out. Yeah, now we're talking. Now we're talking. But this is fundamentally it. Like, are Nazis created? Should they be considered victims of conditioning? Oh, now we're getting into something real interesting, right? Like, there is like a base, there is a base question, right? That is it nature or is it nurture? This is one of the great human questions. Like, how to what degree is it just coming out of the natural world, and to what degree is it coming out of the environmental conditioning and the environmental space? And I think it's both. It's just to what degree is it? And it is an interesting question that you're bringing up, Ward, because is it possible to create a society that eliminates Nazism, that eliminates this impulse for ethnic cleansing, that eliminates this impulse for racial purity cults and these sorts of things? Is that possible to even do? And certainly it should be theoretically possible to build a society and a culture where the environment is such that should something like that pop down, it's immediately pressed down. But I think that I do think that part of being a monkey is that kind of just comes out of our consciousness. That the push and the desire for racial purity exists within the just within the human consciousness. And the more we deal with it, and the more we interact with it, the more we see that how bad it is and how negative it is for us to operate in these sorts of ways. Which is true of lots of things. So we are incentivized completely to create an environment in which Nazism cannot flourish. And people can't be conditioned into it. But I do think the reality is that we always need to be vigilant and take a very hard stance against it, because I do think that, like, and I don't have like a document for you or something. I just believe that people do get manifest into this world and are just evil. Like, I really do think that's true. And like, psychopaths are born. There's this I read this for God's sakes, I read this graphic novel. I don't know why I was struggling with that. I read this graphic novel called Dahmer, and it was about the life of Jeffrey Dahmer. And like, the question constantly was like, how, or is, about somebody like Jeffrey Dahmer, renowned serial killer, how did he become this way? And when I read that graphic novel, I really realized, and I think the people who were dealing with Jeffrey Dahmer really came to understand and realize that he didn't become this way. He was this way. That he was manifest into the world this way. And I think that's just unfortunately an unfortunate reality of what it is to be a human in the world. That people can come in and just be like, not only lacking completely in compassion and empathy, those things don't exist, but they also have a craving to kill. I think, and I think very much in the same way with Nazism, that there are just people who are that way. I look at somebody like David Duke. I think David Duke is like that. Like, David Duke is a Nazi and a Klan member, like a Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan. Not because of his conditioning, not because of his environment, but because he was born that way. I just think there's a truth to that. And is this getting me into kind of a sifting sand sort of situation? Probably. But I think that what's important for us is to build a society that understands that it needs to be vigilant. You never actually truly defeat Nazism. Never really. It's always around, right? It just sort of lurks underneath the surface. And it requires a vigilance to stand against. The chimps are in the Stone Age, the tables may turn. I mean, wouldn't that be crazy? Like, a group of apes declare their independence, seize territory. Banhammer, yeah. Oh yeah. And Ward, I think your question is born of like, to what degree should we sympathize? To what degree should we try to give empathy towards these types of people? You know, like, they are in many ways victims of this as well. What a horrible life. Honestly, like, what a fucking brutal, like, closed, suspicious, dark, dingy, gritty, gross, kind of slimy life to constantly, and you would constantly have to view the people around you as this, like, enemy, as this grotesquerie. Like, I can't, it's just exhausting to me. And I understand where you're coming from, Islam, for sure. Trucker convoy people, for the majority, deserve sympathy. Hitler, not so much. I mean, for God's sakes, like, Hitler writes Mein Kampf fairly early. Like people have this sort of conception of Hitler that he wrote Mein Kampf while he was in power. That Mein Kampf kind of came after. You know, that's how people generally think about it, but that's completely false. He wrote Mein Kampf pretty early in his life. And like, so think about that. Like, here's a guy who's striking at politics and doing this kind of stuff and gets support from industrialists while holding on to a book that explicitly says we should round up the Jews. Like, whew. They usually start out as people who just aren't knowledgeable, misinformed, and once they go deeper down the pipeline, they understand their ideology isn't rooted in reality, but they embrace that. Well, and also I think we listened to I forget his name, but Watson had us listen to that fellow who's talking about how fascism rises, and like they know their ideology isn't rooted in reality, but reality is betraying them, right? That they have no influence politically, they can't move the bar, their political class is actively betraying them and working against them. And so embracing an ideology that it itself is not rooted in reality is just par for the course. You know? Echo chamber, for sure. Oh, for sure, dude. For sure. The echo chamber part. Like, I recently got banned off a subreddit called Enough Commie Spam. Somebody tagged me because, you know, my commie stuff gets spread around. And I popped in and just said very cleanly, like, yeah, we're funding Nazi groups in Ukraine. And that was essentially my comment. And I got banned from it. And it's just like, oh, okay. Like, this is a pro-Nazi group. Like, real cleanly. Like, I say that kind of stuff all over the place, and I don't get banned for it. But if you've created, like, a Nazi echo chamber, like Enough Commie Spam is, obviously, then coming in and making a very clear statement that obviously makes sense is seen as a bannable offense. Oh, incidentally, I'd also like to share, anytime I go to our NDP and point out that we've been funding Nazis, it gets extremely downvoted. Like, the NDPers do not want to hear the truth about what we're doing in Ukraine. Like, they're not interested in that. Like, I think the NDP is just liberals. Like, I don't see a working class anything there. Like, it's just full of liberals who are like, we want to be slightly more piecemeal reformist. Hitler wrote Mein Kampf during his imprisonment, published it when he was in prison. The reason he was in prison was because he tried to do a coup d'etat. That's right, the failed coup d'etat. Oh, Mocked getting real specific. He didn't write it, but dictated it. Rudolf Hess was the author. Well, la-di-da, Mr. Mocked Man. That's an interesting man. Hitler just loved the speeches and the talking, eh? Like, what a fucking character. Millennials for NDP on Facebook is terrible too. Yeah, dude. It's just fucking liberalism. And this Ukrainian crisis is really showing us how dangerous liberalism is, actually. Right? Like, it's just like literally Nazi apologetics is what I'm seeing these days. Like, it's Nazi apologetics. Like what kind of mental gymnastics do we need to do to convince people that Nazism is acceptable? That it's acceptable that we funded Nazis, right? Totally normal society, right? We funded Nazis, sure, but like only a little. I highly recommend the documentary on Netflix, Hitler, Inner Circle. If you ever watch The Triumph of All speech, Rudolf Hess is the one who introduces Hitler. Oh yeah, okay. I don't know how deep into like I'm reading this book, the Rise and Fall of the Third Reich, and that's enough for me. Like, part of the reality of doing this, guys, and it's something that I kind of touch on every so often, but I think it's worth bringing up. I take a lot of psychic damage doing this, you know, and I gotta say that for myself as well. That, like, pursuing this job, pursuing this thing that I'm doing, which I'm very grateful that you guys are all here and like that you're all doing it. Please like, share, subscribe, give me some money. I could definitely use the money. But part of the doing of the job is that I'm constantly struggling with the psychic damage that I'm taking. And I can feel it. You can find Mein Kampf at your local library, bud. You can Google search Mein Kampf. Mein Kampf is easy to find. Like, it's fairly well proliferated. And that's what's killing me the most about this situation with Ukraine is like really realizing like how deep we have fallen, or how maybe not fallen, but like how far away, like how low the bar actually is. Like, really, politically, we are at a point here in Canada where I have to actually ask, are you against Nazis? Did your party fund Nazis? To what degree do you think Nazism is acceptable? And these are actually, this has actually become legitimate questions that we have to actually answer in our political discourse now. Yeah, it's the ramblings of a lunatic. Yeah, no, for sure is. Like, Hitler was, but Hitler is like the prime example of like why you should not support Nazis, right? Because once they get power, you can't control them, right? Like, you can pretend as though, oh, I'll get them into these positions and they'll do as I say and all that kind of stuff, but that isn't what happens, right? That when they finally get power for themselves, they use it for themselves. Was the art school story true? Are you talking about, like, he was a failed artist, like he wanted to be a painter, and he did paint, made some paintings, which everybody calls, I mean, we could probably, the paintings of Adolf Hitler. Man, I am for sure on some CIA watch list, man. Right? Like, derivative, but not bad. He's a better painter than I was, right? I think, like, Hitler himself is like the absolute true, like the truism behind Adolf Hitler is that he himself is a victim of the economy that abandons artists. Like, he wanted to be an artist, but he couldn't make a living doing it, right? Because the economy didn't allow him to. It's fairly decent, frankly. Like, not particularly imaginative, but decent. Better than I could do. This is like some Bob Ross shit right up in here. He didn't get into an art school or something. Yeah, I don't necessarily remember the story, but it's ringing true, Islam. That I think he wanted to join an art school, and he didn't get in because of his he wasn't prestigious enough. I'll put it that way. Did you check your Twitter? Oh no, bud. Sorry, I didn't actually. Well, here, let's do it now. I got Twitter open right here. How do I even fucking check this? I don't even know. Oh yeah, here you go. The U.S. Sun. All-out war. Ukraine's neo-Nazi militia preparing to fight to the death in Russian war with guerrilla forces and Mad Max tanks. Wow. Wow. Fucking the U.S. Sun, no less. Holy shit. Let's see what the U.S. Sun is saying. It comes as Ukraine sits on the brink of all-out war with Russia. Ukraine has numerous military, but the most infamous is the Azov Battalion. Yeah. Now they're being straight up. They've jerry-rigged tanks and tractors to create Mad Max-style fighting vehicles, dubbed the Azovets. Hardcore. In 2009, New Republic reported the Azov Battalion set up the far-right fight club, Kiev Bar. Let's see, did they mention, are we funding? See, this is what they're going to do, right? They're going to talk about the Azov Battalion and the Nazis, but they're just going to not talk about the fact that we're funding them. A far-right politician, fight to the death. Yeah, despite their use of neo-Nazi symbols, the battalion was incorporated into Ukraine's National Guards to support their fight against Russia. Messages, January. yeah, there's Nazis in Ukraine, right? And so here's the story coming out. Yeah, the Nazis are actually in Ukraine. Yeah, but like, we're just not going to talk about the fact that we're funding them, right? So that's the pivot, right? Oh yeah, here's the Nazis that the communists are talking about. Yeah, there they are, the Nazis, right? Oh yeah, the Nazis. Just and we funded them. That's what they're doing. Let's see if they actually on the end openly racist. Yeah, Russian troops, recent weeks. Instead, NATO announcing today. U.S. for its part, blah blah. Yeah, Russian troops, fears, false flag attack, denied both last night, embattled. Yep, false flag. Yeah, just like there are Nazis. No, we're not going to talk about funding them. Right? Just like the lie of omission. Cool article, dude. I'm actually going to save this article. This is still a really good article because it's got a lot of good information. And honestly, it's the first article that I'm seeing from any corporate-run enterprise that is actually being so upfront about the inclusion of Nazi battalions. Like, this is very, very, like, upfront. Like, they're very, very honest about the reality of Nazism within the Ukrainian, like the usage of this picture, even, right? Like this is very strong, right? So strong article that exists in order, but it exists, Islam, and I think this way very much about what's going on with the right wing news media in the United States. People, think about this idea, and this will be my closing thought for the day. Think about somebody like Candace Owens, right? Like, Candace Owens is a kook. She's a nut job. She's a conspiracy theorist who is easy to discredit. But you'll notice that her takes on the Ukraine conflict is correct and align pretty closely to Marxist critical analysis. So what I think the death cult is doing is they are creating these easy to discredit lunatic types in the media, and they're going to have those people espouse the Marxist talking points, so that if the communists, the actual Marxists, start saying like, yeah, that's actually correct, then it creates an unfortunate allegiance that they don't want. Like, I don't have a source for this. I don't have a document that says like this is the case, this is the strategy, but it looks like, right? Like, that's what it looks like. Apparently Trudeau is fast-tracking Ukrainian immigration because of this. I wonder if he's getting some of his fascist friends out that we've been financing. I mean, that's part of it for sure, Watson. The Trudeau administration and the Trudeau family, like, forget about the Liberals. The Trudeau family has a extremely long history of kowtowing to Ukrainians for political support. Like Pierre Elliott Trudeau, for example, Canada is one of the only nations. There's only 5 nations on the planet that acknowledge the Holodomor was a genocide, and Canada is one of them, and that is because post-World War II, we had an enormous amount, and also not just post-World War II, but because of the famine, because of the Holodomor, we had a lot of Ukrainian immigration. And there are like Ukrainian communes and things like this that exist throughout Manitoba. I grew up around Ukrainian communes. And the Liberals, under Pierre Elliott Trudeau, did a really good job of garnering support from those Ukrainians. And so it makes sense that Trudeau would fast-track Ukrainian immigration because, I mean, for God's sakes, Chrystia Freeland, her background is Ukrainian, right? Like, her grandfather was a Ukrainian, also a Nazi sympathizer and a collaborator, but Ukrainian nonetheless, right? And so strictly from, like, just the familial position, from just, like, Chrystia Freeland is connected to Ukrainian groups here in Canada. Justin Trudeau is connected. His father was connected to Ukrainian groups. There are large organized Ukrainian groups. So, of course, Trudeau is going to fast-track Ukrainian immigration because his base, sections of his base, want him to. And so, it's in my view, it's less that, like, he's getting his fascist friends out that we've been financing and all that kind of stuff. Probably. Like, there is probably an element of that, sure. But I think it's probably more to do with their long-standing ties between the Ukrainian community and the Liberal Party. That at this point are familial, right? Like Pierre Elliott Trudeau, Justin Trudeau, right? Like that's pretty tight link. Pretty tight link. I think the death cult is trying to pull a fishhook theory to discredit leftist mobilization. Let's get real specific with this, because I think I know what you're talking about, Islam, but I want to be fishhook political theory. I'm pretty sure I know what you're talking about. I just want to... Are you talking about the horseshoe theory? No, the fishhook theory. Far left, centrist, far right. What? You know what? I'm going to be honest. I don't know what this is. I know about the horseshoe theory. What's the fishhook? What? Let's go. Let's go. Let's learn together. Yeah, here we go. What is? Oh, get fucked. I'm surprised there isn't like a Wikipedia for this. Centrists and the far right on the political spectrum are in fact very close. Created in response to the horseshoe theory, equating the far left and the far right due to similar tactics, the theory states that centrists allowing the far right to preach their beliefs will allow the far right to grow greater and lead to the rise of fascism again. It suggests that centrists paved the way for fascism, and so the two parties are part of the same problem. Whilst there have been cases made for this theory, it is mainly used to satirize and discredit the horseshoe theory. Oh yeah, I think I see what you're saying, and I don't know. There seems to be a truth to this. Like, liberals open the door to fascists, like for sure they do, and this fishhook theory idea being like a real clear example of this would be a centrist saying, using free speech argument in order to say that it's okay for Nazis to espouse their beliefs. Ah, you meant horseshoe. Fucking. Making me fucking look like an asshole. This whole bargain. That's okay, we learned something. We learned something. That's great. We learned something today, Islam. You and me together. We learned something today. Isn't that nice? Yeah, the horseshoe theory. The horseshoe theory, I think we all are much more familiar with, where the far right and the far left are the idea is that they're actually very close to one another. But I think this is bullshit, because, like, the only similarities that exist between the far right or the far left are some tactics. So, for example, the Freedom Convoy surrounds the halls of power, shuts down infrastructure, right? That's a tactic that the far left also would use, right? But, like, in terms of purpose and to who the beneficiaries would be, they couldn't be further from each other. And it always, like, this political, like, there is actually no such thing as left and right, by the way. Like, it doesn't actually exist. It just exists as a way for us to sort of conceptualize in the abstract space and to sit and to understand who is opposed to one another, right? Because there is obvious political opposition, right? But there is no left. There is no right. It's just abstract theory language. So it's anyway. Ugh. Just like money, right? Money doesn't exist. It just exists in this kind of abstract purpose idea. We learned that the fishhook theory is the church of the flying spaghetti monster of political theory. Yes. Yes. All right, guys. On that note, This is the end of this video. This is the end of this one. Always remember, guys, each and every one of you is a quantum being walking around in quantum energy. These billionaires are spending hundreds of billions of dollars to make sure you never realize it, so you'll stay the good little obedient commodity who sells yourself quietly and doesn't do a goddamn thing about it. Rebel. Revolt. Repent. Good luck. We're going to need it.